He built an $8 billion empire on research stolen from his pregnant lover. Then erased all traces of her existence from company history. Left her penniless without a goodbye, told his board she was mentally unstable. For 18 years, she raised their daughter alone while he became an industry legend. The daughter discovered the truth during a school project on biotechnology patents. Her mother's signature, hidden in code that powered a global agricultural revolution. All while they struggled to pay rent and cover her mother's mounting medical bills. Would you silently accept this injustice? Or infiltrate your father's company as an unknown prodigy? The most dangerous enemy isn't a business rival, it's the daughter you never acknowledged. The rain tapped gently against the windows of Astrid Vale's cramped university lab. Outside, the autumn night had fallen hours ago, but inside, illuminated by the blue glow of computer monitors, Astrid worked with single-minded focus. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pausing occasionally to tuck a strand of auburn hair behind her ear as she refined the algorithm that had consumed the last 3 years of her doctoral research. The date stamp on her final code revision read 2:17 a.m., September 14, 2005. And that, she whispered to herself, should revolutionize how we approach sustainable agriculture. Astrid stretched, her eyes burning from hours of concentration. At 26, she was already considered one of the most promising researchers in biotechnology, specifically in the emerging field of algorithmically optimized crop yields. Her work combined genetic sequencing with environmental adaptation factors, creating predictive models that could dramatically increase food production while reducing resource consumption. The door to the lab swung open, startling her. Working late again, Vale? Don't you ever sleep? Professor Winters stood in the doorway, his weathered face creased with concern. Just finished, actually. Astrid gestured to her screen. The final simulation exceeded expectations. 37% yield increase with 22% less water consumption. Professor Winters raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed despite himself. Those numbers would change the world, especially in developing regions. But you need to rest. The Maxwell Conference is tomorrow, and your presentation is the highlight of the Emerging Technologies panel. I know. Astrid began gathering her notes. Everything's ready. I just needed to verify the final data points. Good. He nodded approvingly. Because there's going to be serious industry interest in your work. I've heard rumors that representatives from Agritech Global and Hyperion will be there specifically to see your presentation. Astrid's exhaustion vanished instantly. Hyperion? They're mostly in consumer tech. Why would they care about agricultural algorithms? Because Callum Rhodes is smarter than most people give him credit for. Professor Winters leaned against the doorframe. He sees the connections between seemingly disparate technologies. And if I were betting on the next tech visionary to change the world, my money would be on him rather than those dinosaurs at Agritech. Astrid had read about Callum Rhodes. At 32, he had already built Hyperion into a formidable player in the technology sector, focusing primarily on innovative hardware solutions. The company wasn't yet among the giants, but industry insiders spoke of Rhodes with a mixture of admiration and wariness. His intensity and vision had attracted serious venture capital, though some questioned his unconventional approaches. Well, Astrid said, saving her work to multiple backup drives, I guess I'd better be impressive tomorrow. The following morning, the Maxwell Conference Center hummed with activity. Astrid navigated the crowded exhibition hall, her presentation notes clutched in one hand, a much-needed coffee in the other. Despite her exhaustion, she felt a buzz of excitement. This was the culmination of years of work, the moment when her research would finally reach beyond academic journals to those who could implement it on a global scale. Her panel wasn't scheduled until 11 a.m., giving her time to browse other presentations and calm her nerves. As she examined a display on nanomaterials, a voice spoke close to her ear. Impressive work, but they've overlooked the scalability issues. Astrid turned to find herself face to face with a tall man with intense blue eyes and dark hair that curled slightly at the temples. He wore no conference badge, but she recognized him immediately from tech magazine profiles. "Callum Rhodes," she said, surprised by her own steadiness. "Thinking of moving Hyperion into nanomaterials?" His eyebrows rose slightly, pleased at being recognized. "Always considering the possibilities. The future belongs to those who can connect different technological domains." His gaze was direct, assessing. "You're Dr. Astrid Vale. I've read your papers on algorithmic approaches to agricultural optimization." Now it was Astrid's turn to be surprised. "You've read my academic papers. That's not usually leisure reading for tech CEOs. I'm not most tech CEOs." His smile transformed his face, softening the intensity into something almost charming. "And I make it a point to understand breakthrough work, regardless of field. Your approach to combining genetic sequencing with environmental adaptability metrics is genuinely innovative." The casual way he summarized her complex research indicated he truly had read and understood her work. Astrid felt a flutter of something beyond professional interest. There was a magnetism to Callum Rhodes that his media appearances hadn't captured. "I'm presenting the latest results in about an hour, if you're interested," she offered. "That's why I'm here." He glanced at his watch. "But I was hoping to discuss your work privately first. Would you join me for coffee?" Astrid hesitated only briefly. "As long as I'm back in time for my panel." "Of course." The conference center cafe was crowded, but Callum led her to a reserved table in a quiet corner. Privilege and power, Astrid thought, observing how effortlessly he navigated spaces, expecting accommodation and receiving it. Over coffee, his questions about her research were incisive, demonstrating not just comprehension but genuine insight. Astrid found herself explaining concepts she rarely discussed outside her specialized field, surprised by how quickly he grasped the implications. "The potential applications extend far beyond just increasing crop yields," she explained, drawing a diagram on a napkin. "This adaptive algorithm could revolutionize how we approach resource allocation in multiple domains, including energy consumption, water distribution, even supply chain optimization." Callum finished her thought, studying her diagram. "You've created something that transcends its original purpose." "Exactly." Astrid felt the thrill of being truly understood. "But the agricultural application alone could address food scarcity in regions most vulnerable to climate change impacts. If implemented correctly." Callum's expression turned serious. "Which is why I wanted to speak with you before your presentation. Hyperion is establishing a new division focused on sustainability technologies. Your work would be the cornerstone of that initiative." Astrid blinked in surprise. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership." His intensity was magnetic. "Your research combined with Hyperion's resources and implementation capabilities. We could move this from theoretical to practical within months instead of years." The proposal was unexpected but undeniably tempting. Academic research moved slowly, constrained by funding cycles and institutional caution. The prospect of seeing her work actually implemented, making real-world differences, was powerful. "I would need complete oversight of how the algorithm is applied," she said carefully. "And continued research freedom." "Absolutely." Callum leaned forward. "I don't want to constrain your innovation, I want to amplify it. Visit Hyperion next week. See our facilities, meet the team, then decide." By the time Astrid delivered her presentation an hour later, her mind was already racing with possibilities. The audience response was enthusiastic, with questions extending well beyond the allocated time. Throughout, she was aware of Callum watching from the back of the room, his focus unwavering. When she finally emerged from the conference hall, he was waiting. "Dinner?" he asked simply. "To discuss next steps." What began as a professional dinner evolved into a connection neither had anticipated. Over shared plates and wine, their conversation expanded beyond algorithms and technology to philosophy, art, and visions of the future. Callum's passion matched Astrid's own, his perspective challenging and invigorating. "Most people think too small," he said, gesturing with his glass. "They see technology as tools to make existing systems more efficient. I see it as a way to reimagine systems entirely." "Is that what Hyperion aims to do? Reimagine systems?" "It's what I aim to do." His eyes held hers. Hyperion is just the vehicle. The right idea with the right team behind it can transform how humanity addresses its fundamental challenges. That sounds almost idealistic for someone Business Tech Monthly called ruthlessly pragmatic. Astrid smiled. "The media sees what I allow them to see." Callum's expression softened. "But you understand the vision behind the work. It's rare to meet someone who thinks in the same expansive way." The evening extended late into the night, their connection deepening with each hour. When they finally parted, it was with plans for Astrid to visit Hyperion headquarters the following week. What she couldn't have known then was how that single day would alter the trajectory of her life. The courtship of Astrid Vale and Callum Rhodes unfolded with the same intensity that characterized both their professional approaches. Two brilliant minds finding unexpected resonance, challenging and inspiring each other. Within a month, Astrid had accepted a position at Hyperion, leading the newly formed Sustainable Technologies division. Within 3 months, their professional collaboration had evolved into a personal relationship that surprised everyone in their circles. "He's different with her," Callum's longtime business partner, Orion Teller, remarked to Hyperion's head of operations. "More grounded. Less obsessed with competitive positioning." "She's good for him," Fiona Winters agreed, watching the couple across the room at Hyperion's annual Innovation Gala. "And good for the company. The Sustainable Tech division has attracted more positive attention than anything we've done in years." What outsiders observed as a perfect partnership felt even more profound to the couple themselves. For Astrid, Callum represented the possibility of seeing her work make a genuine global impact. For Callum, Astrid brought intellectual challenge and a moral compass that balanced his sometimes ruthless drive. Their wedding, 6 months after they met, was small but elegant, attended by a select group of friends and colleagues at Callum's cliffside home overlooking the Pacific. No family attended, Callum's parents having died years earlier, Astrid's relationship with her distant father long since dissolved. "Who needs conventional family structures when we can build something better?" Callum had said when Astrid expressed momentary sadness at the absence of traditional family. "We're creating our own legacy, defining our own meaning." The first year passed in a whirlwind of work and passion. Astrid's algorithm, now powering Hyperion's GrowSmart system, began pilot implementations in 3 countries. Initial results exceeded even her optimistic projections, drawing interest from international development agencies and agricultural conglomerates alike. Callum leveraged this success masterfully, positioning Hyperion as a visionary company addressing global challenges. Investment poured in, and with it, Callum's profile rose. Magazine covers, speaking engagements at prestigious global forums, private meetings with world leaders, all elevated him from successful entrepreneur to technology visionary. The changes were subtle at first. Callum working later, traveling more, increasingly absorbed in Hyperion's expanding empire. Their intellectual discussions gradually centered more on market strategy than philosophical implications. Still, when they were together, the connection remained electric, 2 brilliant minds in perfect sync. Then came the international expansion opportunity, a partnership with the European Innovation Consortium that would implement Hyperion technologies across multiple sectors in 12 countries. The negotiations were delicate, requiring Callum's constant attention for weeks. The night he returned from Brussels with the signed agreement, Astrid waited with news of her own. "We're pregnant," she told him when he walked through the door, exhausted but triumphant from his transatlantic flight. The silence that followed stretched painfully. Callum stood frozen, his expression shifting from confusion to something Astrid couldn't quite identify. Pregnant, he finally repeated, setting down his briefcase. How far along? About 2 months. She stepped toward him, uncertain now. I only confirmed it last week. I see. He moved to the bar cart and poured himself a drink, an unusual action for him. This is unexpected. I know the timing isn't ideal with the European expansion, but I thought you'd be happy. Astrid felt suddenly cold despite the warm evening. We've talked about having a family eventually. Eventually, yes. Abstract discussions about some distant future. He downed his drink in one swallow. Astrid, we're at a critical inflection point. The next 18 months will determine whether Hyperion becomes a truly global force or remains merely successful. I need to be completely focused. And you think a baby makes that impossible? The chill spread through her body. Millions of people manage to build careers while having families, Callum. Millions of people aren't trying to transform multiple global industries simultaneously. His voice sharpened. This isn't about conventional choices or conventional limitations. The argument that followed was their first serious conflict, revealing fault lines in their relationship that had been masked by shared intellectual passion and professional success. Callum's concerns centered entirely on timing and potential constraints on his accelerating ambitions. Astrid's hurt deepened as she realized he viewed their child primarily as a complication rather than a joy. The following weeks brought uneasy reconciliation. Callum apologized for his initial reaction, attributing it to exhaustion and surprise. He accompanied Astrid to her first ultrasound, showed appropriate interest in the preparations, even suggested converting one of their homes and used rooms into a nursery. But something fundamental had shifted. The easy synchronicity between them was replaced by careful conversations and growing distance. As Astrid's pregnancy progressed, Callum's absences lengthened. The European expansion demanded attention, but so did new opportunities in Asia and emerging markets. Hyperion's valuation soared, crossing the billion-dollar threshold and cementing Callum's status among technology's elite visionaries. With success came a subtle transformation. The man who had once spoken passionately about technology's potential to address humanity's greatest challenges now discussed market dominance and competitive advantage. In rare moments of candor, he confessed to Astrid that the power and recognition had become intoxicating. They listen when I speak now, he told her after returning from Davos. World leaders, industry titans, they all want Hyperion's involvement. Do you understand what that means? We're not just building a company, we're reshaping global systems. We're, she noted, had become, in most of his narratives, his individual vision eclipsing their once shared mission. At 7 months pregnant, Astrid still led the Sustainable Technologies division, though increasingly from home as Callum's concerns about her health became strangely insistent. Her algorithm continued to evolve, its applications expanding beyond agriculture into water management systems and energy grid optimization. Her team remained loyal, though interactions with other Hyperion divisions grew strained as Callum's leadership style shifted toward more centralized control. The morning everything changed began normally enough. Astrid woke to find Callum already gone, a pattern that had become standard rather than exception. She spent the morning refining code for a new implementation in drought-affected regions, then joined a video conference with her team to discuss quarterly objectives. It was during this meeting that she noticed something odd. References to upcoming projects mentioned the proprietary Hyperion algorithm rather than Dr. Vale's algorithm as had been standard practice. When she questioned this, her team looked uncomfortable. There was a company-wide memo last week about standardizing terminology, her deputy director explained hesitantly. All innovations are to be referenced as Hyperion technologies without individual attribution. That doesn't make sense for academic publications or patent applications, Astrid pointed out, frowning. Researcher attribution is standard practice. The memo specifically mentioned that all publications and patents would now go through the legal department for terminology review. Troubled, Astrid ended the meeting early and attempted to call Callum. When he didn't answer, she accessed the company intranet to find this mysterious memo herself. Her credentials were denied. A second attempt yielded the same result: access restricted. Please contact system administrator. Now genuinely concerned, Astrid called Orion Teller, Callum's longtime business partner and Hyperion's chief strategy officer. Astrid, I was just about to call you. Orion's usually calm voice sounded strained. Have you spoken to Callum today? No, I was trying to reach him about some strange developments with my system access. A pause. He didn't discuss any of this with you? Discuss what, Orion? What's happening? Another pause, longer this time. I think we should meet in person. I can come to you, given your condition. I'm pregnant, not incapacitated, Astrid replied sharply. Just tell me what's going on. There's been a restructuring of the Sustainable Technologies division. As of this morning, it's been integrated into the broader innovation group, with leadership transferred to Marcus Geller. Astrid felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. That's impossible. I wasn't consulted. I'm the division director. Orion corrected gently. The board approved the reorganization last night. Callum presented it as a mutual decision, to allow you to focus on your health and the baby. That's absurd. Astrid's mind raced. This is my division, my research. Callum can't just, he wouldn't. Astrid, there's more. Orion's voice dropped further. The GrowSmart system is being positioned as core Hyperion technology for the Asian market expansion. The presentation materials list Callum as the chief architect of the underlying algorithm. The room seemed to tilt around her. That's my algorithm. My life's work. It has my signature embedded in the code, for God's sake. I know. Orion sounded genuinely distressed. I tried to address this privately with Callum, but he's changed. The success, the international recognition, it's affecting his judgment. Where is he now? Astrid struggled to keep her voice steady. On a plane to Singapore for the Asia-Pacific Technology Summit. He's delivering the keynote on Hyperion's agricultural revolution. After ending the call with Orion, Astrid sat motionless, her hand resting on her swollen belly, trying to process the betrayal. This wasn't just a corporate restructuring or credit misattribution. This was the systematic erasure of her contribution from the company she had helped build, from the technology she had created. With shaking hands, she tried calling Callum again, then sent multiple messages demanding an explanation. No response came. Finally, she drove to Hyperion headquarters, her anxiety mounting with each mile. The familiar security guard at the entrance looked uncomfortable as he checked his screen. I'm sorry, Dr. Vale, but you're not on the approved access list. That's ridiculous. I'm the Director of Sustainable Technologies and the wife of the CEO. His discomfort visibly increased. I understand, ma'am, but I have specific instructions. Your access credentials have been suspended pending review. Review of what? Astrid's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. Who authorized this? Mr. Rhodes directly, ma'am. If you'd like to leave a message, I can make sure it reaches the appropriate channels. Humiliated and increasingly frightened, Astrid returned to her car. As she sat gripping the steering wheel, her phone finally chimed with a message from Callum. This isn't how I wanted to handle things, but you've forced the issue. The company is at a critical juncture. Your emotional state during pregnancy makes this transition necessary. We'll discuss arrangements when I return from Asia. Please don't contact Hyperion staff or attempt to access facilities in the meantime. Emotional state. Astrid read the message 3 times, disbelief turning to rage. She had been nothing but rational and focused, continuing to develop breakthrough applications of her algorithm despite her pregnancy. This wasn't about her emotional state. This was about Callum systematically removing her from the narrative of Hyperion's success. She drove home in a daze, trying to make sense of what was happening. How had the man who had once spoken of partnership and shared vision transformed into someone who could betray her so completely? The hours passed in a blur of attempted calls, urgent messages to trusted colleagues, and growing horror as she pieced together the extent of Callum's actions. He had been methodically preparing this move for months. Her gradual isolation from key meetings, the insistence that she work from home, the subtle repositioning of her research as Hyperion technology in external communications. All of it calculated to minimize disruption when she was finally removed entirely. As night fell, Astrid's desperation peaked. She attempted to remotely access her research servers using emergency protocols, only to find everything locked. 18 months of additional development, refinements, and applications of her algorithm, all suddenly beyond reach. At midnight, an email arrived from Hyperion's legal department. Dear Dr. Vale. This notice serves as a formal reminder of your confidentiality obligations under your employment agreement with Hyperion Technologies. All research, development, algorithms, and related intellectual property created during your tenure are the exclusive property of Hyperion. Any attempt to access, copy, share, or replicate this proprietary information will result in immediate legal action. Furthermore, any claims regarding ownership or attribution contrary to company records will be viewed as potentially defamatory and addressed accordingly. We understand this transition may be difficult, but Hyperion remains committed to an amicable resolution that respects both your contributions and the company's intellectual property rights. Regards. Legal Department. Hyperion Technologies. The clinical coldness of the message, its carefully worded threats thinly veiled as corporate procedure, broke something in Astrid. This wasn't just professional betrayal. This was Callum weaponizing the legal system to steal her life's work while she carried their child. When dawn came, bringing no response to her increasingly desperate messages, Astrid made a decision. She packed essential belongings, withdrew the maximum amount from their joint account, and left the home she had shared with Callum. She couldn't stay in a space that now felt contaminated by lies, waiting for him to return and explain away his betrayal with more manipulation. She checked into a hotel under her maiden name and called the one person she knew she could trust absolutely. Iris? It's Astrid. Everything's fallen apart. I need help. Iris Okafor had been Astrid's closest friend since their undergraduate days. Now a professor of bioethics at Berkeley, she listened in horror as Astrid explained what had happened. You can stay with me as long as you need, Iris said immediately. But Astrid, you need to fight this. What Callum's doing is intellectual theft, pure and simple. Fight him with what resources? Astrid's voice cracked. He controls Hyperion, has the board support, and apparently has been planning this for months. I have some savings, but nothing that would sustain a legal battle against a billion-dollar company. There must be proof somewhere that the algorithm was originally yours. Publications, early drafts, something. My doctoral research proves I developed the initial algorithm, yes. But the most valuable implementations, the refinements that make it truly revolutionary, those were developed at Hyperion. Astrid closed her eyes against rising tears. And according to my contract, anything developed there belongs to the company. But you're his wife. Surely that counts for something legally. I don't know anymore, Iris. I don't know who he is or what he's capable of. She rested her hand on her belly, feeling her daughter move. Right now, I just need to focus on protecting myself and the baby. 3 days later, as Astrid was settling into Iris's guest room, a courier delivered an envelope. Inside was a letter from Callum's personal attorney, along with legal documents. The letter was brief and devastating. Astrid. Your emotional instability during pregnancy has made this situation more difficult than necessary. I had hoped to discuss transition arrangements in person, but your dramatic departure makes that impossible. The enclosed documents outline a generous separation agreement. In exchange for a complete confidentiality clause regarding both our personal relationship and your work at Hyperion, you will receive a one-time payment of $850,000. The agreement includes your voluntary relinquishment of any claims to intellectual property developed during your employment, as well as a non-disparagement clause covering both personal and professional matters. Please understand that this offer is time-sensitive and contingent upon your complete cooperation. Should you choose litigation instead, be aware that Hyperion's resources are substantial, and the process would be lengthy and ultimately futile given the clear language of your employment contract. Regarding the child, I am prepared to support medical expenses related to the birth. However, I must be clear that I do not intend to participate in parenting or maintain an ongoing relationship. My life trajectory and responsibilities to Hyperion are incompatible with family obligations at this time. I trust you will make the rational decision. Callum. Astrid read the letter twice, then slowly placed it on the kitchen table. The clinical detachment, the framing of her as emotionally unstable, the reduction of their child to an inconvenient obligation, all of it revealed a man she had never truly known. What are you going to do? Iris asked softly, having read the letter over her shoulder. I don't know. Astrid's voice was hollow. Fight him and risk everything, or take what he's offering and try to rebuild some kind of life. The agreement is basically hush money, Iris pointed out. He wants to erase you completely, from Hyperion's story and from his life. And if I don't sign? He'll use the company's resources to crush me legally, paint me as unstable and vindictive, and still end up with everything he wants. Astrid felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. He's calculated everything perfectly. The following week brought increasing pressure. Callum's attorneys called daily, emphasizing that generous offer would expire soon. Former colleagues stopped returning Astrid's calls, clearly having been warned against communication. Even academic contacts seemed suddenly distant, the influence of Hyperion's partnerships reaching further than she had realized. Meanwhile, Astrid researched her legal options extensively. The prognosis was grim. While she could prove she developed the original algorithm before joining Hyperion, the most valuable implementations had been created during her employment. The contract she had signed, in what now seemed like naive trust, gave the company full ownership of any intellectual property developed using their resources. A consultation with a high-profile intellectual property attorney confirmed her fears. Even with clear evidence of your original research, litigation would take years, the attorney explained gently. During that time, Hyperion would continue using and profiting from the technology while your legal bills mounted. And given your personal relationship with Rhodes, they could make the process extremely unpleasant, digging into every aspect of your private life. When Astrid was 7.5 months pregnant, she made the hardest decision of her life. She signed the agreement, accepting the payment in exchange for her silence about both the intellectual property theft and Callum's abandonment of their unborn child. I'm not giving up, she told Iris the day she signed. I'm choosing to fight a different battle, on terms that give me and my daughter a chance. 2 weeks later, as Callum was being featured on the cover of Innovation Leader magazine, Astrid went into premature labor. The birth was difficult, complicated by stress and her physical condition. When it was over, the doctor placed a tiny, perfect baby girl in her arms. Hello, Lyra, Astrid whispered, tears streaming down her face. It's just you and me now, but we're going to be extraordinary together. As Astrid held her daughter, a news alert appeared on Iris's phone nearby. Hyperion Technologies' valuation reaches $2 billion as GrowSmart system deployments expand globally. The accompanying photo showed Callum Rhodes speaking at a technology conference, captioned as, "The visionary behind agricultural algorithms transforming food production worldwide." In that moment, looking at her daughter's face while Callum basked in recognition stolen from her work, Astrid made a promise to herself and to Lyra. Whatever it took, however long it required, she would rebuild. Not just her career or financial stability, but a life where truth and integrity mattered more than power and acclaim. The settlement money provided temporary security, but Astrid knew it wouldn't last forever, especially with the medical bills from Lyra's premature birth. More importantly, it came with strings that prevented her from directly challenging Callum's theft of her research. She had signed away her right to claim credit for the algorithm, agreed not to disparage Callum or Hyperion publicly, effectively allowing him to continue building his empire on her stolen work. The legal constraints were comprehensive, clearly crafted by attorneys who understood exactly how to silence her most effectively. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They had assumed Astrid's primary concern would be her own recognition and compensation. They hadn't considered that her real motivation had always been seeing her work help address global challenges, regardless of who received credit. If she couldn't continue developing her original algorithm due to legal constraints, she would create something new, something even more revolutionary. And if she couldn't work within the traditional technology industry due to Callum's influence, she would find alternative paths to implement her innovations. The first years were brutally difficult. Caring for a premature infant while trying to rebuild her professional life stretched Astrid to her breaking point. Lyra required specialized medical care, developmental therapy, and constant attention. The settlement money dwindled faster than anticipated, consumed by medical expenses and the high cost of living near quality healthcare facilities. Astrid's attempts to return to academic research met mysterious resistance. Positions she was eminently qualified for went to less accomplished candidates. Research grant applications received inexplicable rejections. Former colleagues became suddenly unavailable when she reached out about collaboration opportunities. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. Somehow, Callum was ensuring she remained professionally sidelined, perhaps fearing she would develop something that challenged Hyperion's technological dominance, or simply out of vindictive spite. 6 months after Lyra's birth, when yet another promising research position evaporated at the last minute, Astrid sat in her small apartment, watching her daughter sleep, and reassessed her strategy. "I need to think differently," she murmured to herself. "If the traditional paths are blocked, I'll create my own." She began teaching advanced computational biology at a community college, work that was beneath her qualifications but provided steady income and benefits. The position left her evenings free for independent research, developing new approaches that built upon but legally differed from her original algorithm. As Lyra grew from infant to toddler, Astrid established a small consulting practice, providing algorithmic solutions to environmental nonprofits and sustainable agriculture initiatives in developing countries. These organizations couldn't pay much, but they were beyond Callum's influence and genuinely needed her expertise. "Why do you help people for free sometimes?" 4-year-old Lyra asked one evening, watching her mother work late on a project for a rural farming collective. "Because knowledge that stays locked away helps no one," Astrid replied, pulling her daughter onto her lap. "And because sometimes doing what's right matters more than getting paid. Like how you help Mrs. Garcia with her garden even though she can't give you money." "Exactly like that, sweet girl." Astrid smiled, constantly amazed by her daughter's perceptiveness. "Mrs. Garcia shares her tomatoes with us instead, and sometimes that's even better than money." As the years passed, Lyra grew into a remarkably bright child with her mother's analytical mind and a determination that sometimes reminded Astrid painfully of Callum, though she never said so aloud. By age 6, Lyra was reading at a high school level and showing particular aptitude for science and mathematics. Meanwhile, Hyperion continued its meteoric rise, expanding beyond agricultural technology into energy systems, smart city infrastructure, and global resource management. GrowSmart, the system built on Astrid's stolen algorithm, became the industry standard, implemented in over 40 countries and credited with significant increases in agricultural production in climate-challenged regions. Callum Rhodes was hailed as a visionary genius, his personal fortune growing into billions as Hyperion's valuation soared. He became a fixture at global economic forums, advising world leaders on technology policy and sustainable development, the irony of which was not lost on Astrid. She monitored Hyperion's developments closely, noting how the core algorithm she had created was being applied in increasingly diverse domains. Each new application brought fresh pain, watching her intellectual child transformed and expanded without her guidance or input, yet also a complicated pride in seeing the positive impacts of her work, regardless of who received credit. When Lyra was 7, she came home from school unusually quiet. After dinner, as Astrid was helping her with a science project, she finally asked the question Astrid had been dreading for years. "Mom, why don't I have a dad like the other kids?" Astrid set down the model solar system they were constructing and took a deep breath. "You do have a father, Lyra. He just isn't part of our lives." "Why not? Did he die?" "No, he's alive." Astrid chose her words carefully, conscious of both her daughter's need for truth and the painful complexity of the situation. "Before you were born, he decided he didn't want to be a father. He had different priorities." Lyra's brow furrowed. "Didn't he want me?" The question broke Astrid's heart. "Oh, sweetheart, the problem wasn't you. You're perfect, absolutely perfect. The problem was him. Some people aren't ready for the responsibility of being a parent, even when they're grown-ups." "What's his name? What does he look like? Do I look like him?" Astrid hesitated. The non-disparagement clause in her settlement agreement limited what she could say, but more importantly, she had always wanted to protect Lyra from feeling rejected by Callum's choices. "His name is Callum," she said finally. "And yes, you have his eyes and some of his expressions. But your mind, your wonderful, brilliant mind, that's all your own. Can I meet him someday?" "That would be his choice, Lyra. He knows about you, and if he ever wants to meet you, we can discuss it then." Astrid stroked her daughter's dark curls. "But I need you to understand something very important. His choice not to be in our lives doesn't mean you're not loved or that you're missing something essential. You have me, and Aunt Iris, and all the people who care about you so much." Lyra nodded slowly, processing this information with the serious consideration she brought to everything. "Okay. But if I want to know more about him someday, will you tell me?" "When you're older, I promise I'll tell you everything," Astrid replied, knowing that everything would include painful truths she wasn't yet ready to share. That night, after Lyra was asleep, Astrid searched online for recent information about Callum. His latest triumph was splashed across business publications. Hyperion had just secured a $3 billion contract to implement resource management systems in 15 major cities globally, with Callum quoted extensively about the proprietary algorithms developed through years of Hyperion's groundbreaking research. The familiar pain of seeing her work attributed to him was joined by a new worry. As Lyra grew older and more curious about her father, how long could Astrid protect her from discovering the full truth about Callum's betrayal and abandonment? Life settled into a pattern of careful balance for Astrid and Lyra. Their financial situation stabilized, with Astrid's teaching position providing security while her consulting work offered intellectual fulfillment. They moved to a modest but comfortable house in a good school district, prioritizing Lyra's education above all else. As Lyra entered her teen years, her intellectual gifts became increasingly apparent. At 14, she won the National Youth Science Competition with a project on algorithmic approaches to water purification, clearly inheriting her mother's aptitude for computational biology. "Your daughter has extraordinary potential," Lyra's science teacher told Astrid during a parent conference. "Her understanding of complex systems rivals that of my graduate students." "She's always been special," Astrid agreed, pride mingling with a touch of concern. "Sometimes I worry she pushes herself too hard." "That may be true, but it's clearly driven by passion, not just ambition. Whatever you're doing as a parent, keep doing it. She's not just brilliant, she's thoughtful about how her work could help others." That thoughtfulness was something Astrid had consciously cultivated in Lyra, determined that her daughter would understand the ethical implications of technological innovation in ways that Callum had ultimately rejected. At home, their relationship remained close, though Lyra's adolescence brought the natural desire for independence and occasional friction. She rarely asked about her father anymore, seeming to have accepted Astrid's limited explanations. Instead, she focused intensely on her studies and growing interest in biotechnology, often engaging Astrid in complex theoretical discussions that stretched even her extensive knowledge. "You should publish this work," Lyra told her mother one evening, reviewing Astrid's latest algorithmic improvement for water conservation in arid regions. "It's more sophisticated than anything currently in the literature." "Publishing formally isn't always the best way to get ideas implemented," Astrid replied, an answer she had given many times over the years. "My consulting approach lets me work directly with the communities who need these solutions most." "But you deserve recognition. Your algorithms are changing lives, and hardly anyone knows your name." The comment hit closer to home than Lyra could realize. "Recognition isn't everything, sweetheart. Impact matters more than acclaim." Lyra didn't appear convinced but dropped the subject as she often did when her mother became evasive about professional recognition. Unknown to Astrid, these moments were adding to a growing sense in Lyra's mind that something about her mother's career trajectory didn't quite make sense. The true catalyst for change came during Lyra's junior year of high school, when her advanced placement biology class was assigned a research project on biotechnology innovations of the past 2 decades. Students were to select a significant breakthrough and trace its development, including key researchers and implementation impacts. Lyra naturally gravitated toward agricultural technology, an interest influenced by years of watching her mother's work. She chose Hyperion's GrowSmart system as her focus, aware of its global significance but not its connection to her personal history. In the school library, surrounded by research materials and online resources, Lyra began constructing a timeline of GrowSmart's development. The official narrative credited Callum Rhodes with the founding algorithmic approach, with subsequent refinements by Hyperion's research team. As she dug deeper, seeking original research papers to understand the technical foundations, she encountered her first anomaly. A citation in a scientific journal referenced an earlier paper. Adaptive Algorithmic Approaches to Agricultural Optimization, by A. Vale, Ph.D. The publication date preceded Hyperion's first GrowSmart patent by almost 2 years. Curious, Lyra located the original paper in the university database. Reading it, her heart began to race. The foundational concepts described were unmistakably similar to GrowSmart's core functionality, though less refined. More startling was the author's name, Dr. Astrid Vale. "Mom's maiden name," Lyra whispered to herself, suddenly making the connection. She expanded her search, finding several more academic publications by Astrid Vale from the period before GrowSmart's launch, all outlining approaches that appeared fundamentally connected to what became Hyperion's flagship technology. Then, most disturbing of all, she discovered a technology conference presentation listed in an archived program. Next Generation Algorithmic Solutions for Sustainable Agriculture, by Dr. Astrid Vale, Hyperion Technologies. Her mother had worked at Hyperion, the company founded by Callum Rhodes. The timing aligned perfectly with the period just before Lyra's birth. With shaking hands, Lyra typed a new search into her laptop, Callum Rhodes Astrid Vale. The results were sparse but telling. A few old photographs from industry events showed a much younger version of the famous tech CEO standing beside a woman Lyra instantly recognized as her mother. In one image, they were clearly a couple, his arm around her waist as they smiled for the camera at some formal gathering. The final piece clicked into place when Lyra found an archived business news brief from 18 years ago. Hyperion Technologies announces restructuring of Sustainable Technologies division as founder's wife steps down to focus on family. Wife. The word burned in Lyra's vision. Her mother had been Callum Rhodes' wife. Which meant, "He's my father," Lyra whispered, the revelation stunning her into momentary stillness. The famous tech visionary, the billionaire founder of one of the world's most influential companies, was her father. And somehow, her mother had gone from being his wife and a key researcher at Hyperion to a community college professor struggling to make ends meet. What had happened between them? Why had her mother never told her the full truth? And most disturbing of all, why was Callum Rhodes credited with technological innovations that seemed to originate from her mother's research? Lyra gathered her materials and left the library early, her mind racing with questions and emerging theories, none of them pleasant. By the time she arrived home, a cold certainty had settled in her stomach. There was only one explanation that accounted for all the evidence: her father had stolen her mother's work, erased her contributions, and abandoned them both. Astrid was grading papers when Lyra walked into the living room and placed a printout on the table between them. It was the photograph of Astrid and Callum at the technology conference, looking happy and successful together. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Lyra asked quietly. Astrid stared at the image, feeling as though the carefully constructed walls between past and present were suddenly crumbling. "Where did you find this?" "School research project. On Hyperion's Grossmart system." Lyra's voice remained steady, though her eyes betrayed her emotional turmoil. "The revolutionary agricultural algorithm developed by Callum Rhodes, my father, who apparently stole it from you before I was born." Astrid closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. "Sit down, Lyra. It's time you knew everything." For the next 2 hours, Astrid shared the complete story for the first time, holding nothing back. The brilliant partnership that had become both professional and personal. The pregnancy that coincided with Hyperion's international expansion. Callum's gradual transformation as success and ambition consumed his earlier idealism. The systematic erasure of her contributions and eventual forced departure from the company she had helped build. The legal agreement that had silenced her in exchange for financial support when she had no other options. "He left us both," Astrid concluded, tears streaming down her face. "And yes, he built his empire on research I pioneered. But I signed away my right to challenge that to ensure we had some security when you were born. Why didn't you fight?" Lyra demanded, anger and hurt mixing in her voice. "Why let him get away with it? I was 7 months pregnant, suddenly without access to my research, my colleagues, or any support system beyond Iris. Hyperion had billions in funding and an army of attorneys. The legal battle would have consumed years we didn't have and resources we didn't possess." Astrid reached for her daughter's hand. "I chose to focus on you, on building a life where we didn't need him or his money. But it wasn't just about money or credit, was it? He stole your life's work. Work that could have helped millions more people if it hadn't been commercialized and restricted by Hyperion's pricing models." Lyra's perceptiveness cut straight to the heart of what had always pained Astrid most. "He took your contribution to humanity and turned it into a profit engine." "Yes," Astrid admitted. "That's the part I've never been able to fully reconcile. Seeing the technology help people, but knowing how many more could benefit if it were more accessible. And all these years, he's been praised as a visionary genius while you've been teaching basic courses to undergraduates." Lyra's expression hardened in a way that reminded Astrid painfully of Callum at his most determined. "That's not right. It's not fair. Life rarely is, sweetheart. But we've built something good together, haven't we? Something honest and worthwhile." "We have." Lyra squeezed her mother's hand. "And I'm proud of how you've continued your work despite everything he did. But Mom, doesn't some part of you want justice? Want the world to know the truth?" Astrid sighed. "Of course it does. But the agreement I signed prevents me from making public claims about the technology's origins. And even if I could, Callum has spent 18 years constructing a narrative where he's the brilliant innovator behind Hyperion's success. My voice against that established story would be easy to dismiss as the resentment of an ex-wife. What if it wasn't your voice making the claim?" Lyra asked, a calculating look entering her eyes. "What if someone else discovered the truth independently?" "Lyra, what are you thinking?" "Nothing specific yet," she replied too quickly. "I'm just processing everything. It's a lot to take in." But Astrid recognized the expression on her daughter's face, the same look she got when tackling a particularly challenging scientific problem. Lyra was planning something. Promise me you won't do anything rash, Astrid said, suddenly anxious. Callum Rhodes is a powerful man with enormous resources and influence. Challenging him publicly would be dangerous. I promise I won't do anything without careful thought, Lyra replied, choosing her words with precision that did little to reassure her mother. That night, after Astrid had finally fallen into troubled sleep, Lyra sat at her desk with her laptop open to a blank document. At the top, she typed a single title. Project Justice, a 2-year strategy. What her mother didn't understand was that Lyra had inherited not just Astrid's brilliant mind, but Callum's strategic ruthlessness when properly motivated. And nothing could motivate her more than seeing justice for the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her while being erased from her own life's work. You want a legacy, father? Lyra whispered to the darkness. I'll give you one you never expected. The blank document staring back at Lyra seemed both intimidating and full of possibility as she began to outline her plan. At 16, most teenagers worried about college applications and social dynamics. Lyra Vale was mapping out a strategy to expose one of the most powerful technology moguls in the world, who happened to be her biological father. Phase 1, Intelligence Gathering, she typed, her fingers moving with certainty despite the magnitude of what she was undertaking. Over the following weeks, Lyra transformed her bedroom into an investigative command center. One wall became covered with a timeline tracking Hyperion's development alongside her mother's research publications. She created detailed profiles of key Hyperion executives, board members, and research leaders, identifying potential allies and obstacles. Most importantly, she began a methodical analysis of her father's public persona versus reality. Callum Rhodes had carefully crafted his image as a visionary genius, philanthropist, and advocate for technological solutions to global challenges. Articles, interviews, and public appearances portrayed him as brilliant but approachable, driven but ethical. Your carefully constructed myth, Lyra murmured, studying a recent magazine cover featuring Callum at a global climate summit. All built on a foundation of theft and abandonment. Her research continued at school, where she expanded her biotechnology project far beyond the original assignment. Her teacher, impressed by her thoroughness, connected her with a professor at the local university who specialized in agricultural technology innovation. Your analysis of Grossmart's development is remarkably sophisticated, Dr. Hammond told her after reviewing her work. Have you considered pursuing biotechnology as a career path? I have, Lyra replied carefully. In fact, I'm particularly interested in the intersection of algorithmic approaches and biological systems. Like the Hyperion model. Dr. Hammond nodded approvingly. Though as brilliant as their implementation is, the field still has substantial room for improvement, especially in terms of accessibility for developing regions. That's exactly my concern, Lyra said, seizing the opening. The core technology could help far more people if it weren't restricted by commercial constraints. This conversation led to an invitation to join a university research group as a high school intern, giving Lyra access to academic resources and connections she would never have had otherwise. It was her first strategic victory. At home, Astrid noticed her daughter's intensified interest in Hyperion and biotechnology, but attributed it to normal intellectual curiosity following their revelations. Lyra was careful to compartmentalize, keeping her more pointed research private while sharing enough of her legitimate academic work to avoid suspicion. The most difficult part was hiding her growing anger. Each new discovery about Hyperion's profit margins, about how the company restricted access to life-saving technology in poorer regions, about how Callum Rhodes was lauded for humanitarian contributions that barely dented his vast fortune, fueled a rage that sometimes threatened to overwhelm her careful planning. You need to find balance, she reminded herself during a particularly difficult moment, after watching an interview where Callum claimed his greatest motivation was seeing technology improve lives across the socio-economic spectrum. The hypocrisy was staggering. 3 months into her research, Lyra made her first significant breakthrough. Through the university connection, she gained access to early technical documentation of GrossSmart's implementation, including code snippets that had been published in academic journals before commercial restrictions tightened. Examining this code with the analytical eye she'd inherited from both parents, she discovered something remarkable. Buried deep in the algorithmic structure was a signature of sorts, a particular arrangement of variable names that, when their first letters were extracted, spelled apostrophe. "You embedded your name in the foundation code," Lyra whispered, feeling a surge of pride in her mother's foresight. This was proof, subtle but undeniable, that Astrid Vale had created the original algorithm. Further investigation revealed that this signature existed in every major version of the GrossSmart system, apparently unnoticed or perhaps considered too deeply embedded to remove without risking the algorithm's functionality. It was her first piece of concrete evidence linking her mother to the technology Hyperion claimed as their own. Lyra began compiling a secure database of evidence, each piece carefully documented and cross-referenced. She established encrypted storage with multiple backups, aware that if her investigation was discovered, attempts might be made to destroy her findings. As her junior year of high school progressed, Lyra strategically adjusted her public academic focus. She began entering science competitions with projects that showcased her abilities in biotechnology without revealing her specific interest in Hyperion's work. She cultivated relationships with judges and industry mentors, building a reputation as a prodigy with particular insight into algorithmic approaches to biological systems. "Your daughter has remarkable potential," the lead judge of the National Youth Science Forum told Astrid after Lyra won the prestigious Innovation Award. With the right opportunities, she could genuinely change the field. The irony wasn't lost on Astrid, who had once received similar praise before Callum's betrayal altered her trajectory. Still, she supported Lyra's ambitions, unaware of the strategic purpose behind her daughter's increasingly public scientific profile. "I'm so proud of you," she told Lyra after the award ceremony. "You've earned every recognition through your own brilliant work." Lyra felt a pang of guilt at the secrets she was keeping. "I learned from the best, Mom. Everything I know about combining scientific excellence with ethical purpose comes from you." The statement was entirely truthful, even if its context remained hidden. By the summer before her senior year, Lyra's plan had progressed to Phase 2. With her growing recognition in youth science circles, she secured an internship at Meridian Biotechnologies, one of Hyperion's main competitors in the agricultural technology sector. "Are you sure about this internship?" Astrid asked when Lyra announced her acceptance. "It's in San Francisco. You'll be staying with Aunt Iris for the whole summer." "It's an incredible opportunity," Lyra replied, having anticipated her mother's concerns. "Meridian is doing groundbreaking work in sustainable agriculture, and this puts me in a perfect position for college applications." What she didn't mention was that Meridian's offices were 3 blocks from Hyperion's headquarters, or that the company's research director had a well-documented professional rivalry with Callum Rhodes dating back years. The internship proved even more valuable than Lyra had anticipated. Dr. Marcus Reeves, Meridian's research director, took a particular interest in her work, impressed by her insights into algorithmic optimization. "Your approach reminds me of some early work in the field," he told her one afternoon, reviewing her analysis of a crop yield prediction model. "Before Hyperion commercialized everything and locked it behind patents." Lyra carefully kept her expression neutral. "Oh. Whose work?" "A brilliant researcher named Astrid Vale. She published some revolutionary papers about 18 years ago, then seemingly disappeared from the field." He shook his head regretfully. "A real loss to science. Her algorithms had a distinctive elegance that even Rhodes' team hasn't fully replicated, despite their resources." "I'd love to read her papers," Lyra said, heart pounding at this unexpected opening. "For historical context. I'll send you the citations. They're still the foundation of much of our understanding, even if Hyperion won't acknowledge it." Dr. Reeves smiled ruefully. "Between us, there's always been speculation in the field about the timing of Vale's disappearance and Hyperion's sudden breakthrough in agricultural algorithms. But Rhodes' legal team is notoriously aggressive about such suggestions. This conversation led to several more, with Dr. Reeves gradually revealing his suspicions about Hyperion's intellectual property claims. Lyra carefully encouraged these discussions while avoiding any hint of her personal connection to the story. By the end of the summer, she had gained not just valuable industry experience and another impressive credential for her college applications, but also a potential ally in Dr. Reeves, whose ethical concerns about Hyperion's business practices aligned with her own agenda. Returning home for her senior year, Lyra entered the most challenging phase of her preparation, maintaining her academic excellence while continuing her investigation and strategizing her eventual approach to Hyperion. "You seem distracted lately," Astrid observed one evening, finding Lyra staring intently at her computer instead of working on her college applications. "Is everything all right?" "Just weighing my options," Lyra replied, quickly switching screens from Hyperion's latest press release to her MIT application essay. "There are so many factors to consider for college." Astrid sat beside her daughter, concern evident in her expression. "You know you can talk to me about anything that's bothering you, right? Even difficult things." For a moment, Lyra considered confessing her plan. The weight of her secret investigation sometimes felt overwhelming, and Astrid had always been her closest confidant. But she also knew her mother would try to protect her, would insist that confronting Callum was too dangerous, too destabilizing. "I know, Mom. I'm just processing everything. Senior year is intense." "It is," Astrid agreed, though her eyes suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Just remember that your worth isn't defined by which college accepts you or what career path you choose. It's about the integrity you bring to whatever you do." The irony of this advice in light of her secret mission wasn't lost on Lyra. Was there integrity in her plan to infiltrate Hyperion under false pretenses? Or was she allowing her justified anger to compromise the values her mother had instilled in her? These questions haunted her as she completed her college applications, strategically focusing on schools with strong connections to the technology industry. Her primary target was Stanford, not just for its academic excellence but for its proximity to Hyperion and its pipeline of talent to major tech companies. When the acceptance letters arrived in spring, Lyra's path was set. Stanford offered her a substantial scholarship, impressed by her research portfolio and competition wins. The decision appeared straightforward to everyone around her, a brilliant young scientist pursuing the best educational opportunity available. Only Lyra knew that Stanford represented the next strategic position in her carefully constructed plan. "I'm so proud of you," Astrid said at Lyra's high school graduation, tears glistening in her eyes. "You've worked so hard for this." "Thanks to you," Lyra replied, hugging her mother tightly. "Everything I am is because of you." The statement carried more weight than Astrid could know. It was because of her mother, because of the injustice done to her, that Lyra was embarking on this path that would eventually lead to a confrontation with the father who had abandoned them both. The summer before college brought an unexpected development. Dr. Reeves from Meridian contacted Lyra with an intriguing proposal. Hyperion and 3 other major tech companies are launching a joint innovation fellowship for exceptional undergraduate students, he explained during their video call. "Given your interests and abilities, you'd be a strong candidate. I'd be happy to recommend you." "A Hyperion program?" Lyra worked to keep her voice casual despite her racing heart. "That's unexpected. It's a PR initiative, mostly. The tech giants trying to show they're investing in the next generation of innovators. But the access and experience would be valuable, regardless of their motives." This opportunity represented a potential shortcut in her plan, a direct path into Hyperion's ecosystem years earlier than she had anticipated. The risk of exposure would be higher, but the potential rewards were significant. "I'd appreciate the recommendation," she said after a moment's consideration. "It sounds like an incredible opportunity." When the fellowship application arrived, Lyra approached it with meticulous care. Every word was calculated to present her as a perfect candidate, brilliant but not threatening, innovative but respectful of established industry leaders, particularly interested in the intersection of biotechnology and computational systems but without specific mention of agricultural applications. The selection process was rigorous, involving written submissions, interviews, and a practical demonstration of problem-solving abilities. Throughout, Lyra maintained her carefully constructed persona, revealing her exceptional intelligence while concealing her true motives. 2 weeks before she was to begin at Stanford, the notification arrived. She had been selected as one of 12 Vanguard Innovation Fellows, with a placement at Hyperion Technologies for the following summer. "Congratulations!" Astrid exclaimed when Lyra shared the news, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's an incredible opportunity." "You don't seem thrilled," Lyra observed carefully. Astrid hesitated. "I'm proud of you, of course. It's just Hyperion specifically brings up complicated feelings for me." "I know, Mom. But this fellowship is prestigious and will open doors for my career. I can't let personal history dictate my professional choices." The irony of this statement, given that her entire plan was driven by personal history, created a knot of guilt in Lyra's stomach. "You're right, of course." Astrid squeezed her daughter's hand. "And you'll be judged on your own merits there, not on any connection to me. Callum Rhodes likely wouldn't even remember my name after all these years." Lyra doubted this was true, but nodded in agreement. "Exactly. This is about my future, not the past." Her first year at Stanford unfolded with calculated precision. Lyra excelled academically, as expected, while strategically selecting courses and research opportunities that would prepare her for the Hyperion Fellowship. She built relationships with professors connected to the technology industry and participated in entrepreneurship programs that enhanced her understanding of corporate structures and cultures. All the while, she continued her private investigation, now with access to Stanford's extensive research databases and proximity to Silicon Valley's technology community. She compiled financial records showing how Hyperion's valuation had skyrocketed following the introduction of Grossmark, mapping the correlation between her mother's stolen research and Callum Rhodes' growing fortune. Most valuable was her discovery of early trade publications and conference proceedings that contained references to Astrid's role in developing the preliminary algorithms. These materials, published before Callum had fully consolidated his narrative, provided additional evidence of her mother's erased contributions. By spring, as her fellowship at Hyperion approached, Lyra had amassed a comprehensive dossier documenting the true origins of the technology that had built Callum's empire. What she lacked was an effective strategy for using this information to achieve justice without destroying her own position or exposing her mother to legal retaliation. The answer came unexpectedly, during a guest lecture by Phoenix Wright, a renowned investigative journalist known for exposing corporate malfeasance in the technology sector. The most effective accountability doesn't come from outside attacks but from internal pressure points, Wright explained to the rapt audience. When evidence of wrongdoing emerges from within a company's own systems, when the truth is revealed through their own documentation and processes, that's when real change becomes inevitable. After the lecture, Lyra approached him with carefully framed questions about hypothetical scenarios involving intellectual property theft and corporate cover-ups. Wright's insights confirmed her emerging strategy. She needed to work from inside Hyperion, to find or create internal documentation that would make the truth undeniable, even to those with vested interests in maintaining the established narrative. The truth alone isn't enough, Wright told her, intrigued by her sophisticated questions. You need truth that emerges through channels the powerful cannot easily discredit or suppress. As summer approached, Lyra prepared for her entry into Hyperion with the thoroughness of a military strategist planning a critical operation. She studied the company's organizational structure, identified key personnel in the agricultural technology division, and rehearsed her persona as an eager, brilliant student with no connection to Astrid Vale. The night before her fellowship began, she called her mother from her Stanford apartment. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" Astrid asked, her voice carrying concern she was trying to mask. "Excited. Nervous. The usual," Lyra replied, keeping her tone light. It's a big opportunity. Just remember who you are, Lyra. Your integrity matters more than any professional advancement. I know, Mom. I won't forget. The words carried a double meaning Astrid couldn't have understood. The Hyperion headquarters rose like a gleaming monument to innovation in the heart of Silicon Valley, its curved glass facade reflecting the morning sunlight as Lyra approached for her first day. The central atrium soared 18 stories, ringed by open workspaces and collaborative zones designed to foster the creative exchange of ideas, at least according to the corporate mythology. Welcome to Hyperion, the fellowship coordinator greeted the 12 selected students. You represent the brightest emerging talents in your fields, chosen from thousands of applicants. Over the next 12 weeks, you'll be integrated into project teams working on actual Hyperion initiatives, not simulations or busywork. This is real innovation with real impact. Lyra listened attentively, noting the pride with which Hyperion presented itself as a meritocracy where the best ideas prevailed regardless of source. The irony was almost painful. The fellows were assigned to different divisions based on their backgrounds and interests. As Lyra had hoped, her expertise in algorithmic approaches to biological systems earned her a placement in the Advanced Agricultural Systems Group, the direct descendant of the division her mother had once led. We're particularly excited to have you joining us, Dr. Elaine Sharma, the division director, told Lyra during their initial meeting. Your work on adaptive algorithms for variable environmental conditions aligns perfectly with our current research directions. I'm honored to be here, Lyra replied with practiced enthusiasm. Hyperion's GrowSmart system has been revolutionary. I'm eager to learn how it's evolved over time. You'll get an insider's view, certainly. Though some aspects remain proprietary, of course. Dr. Sharma smiled warmly. Your fellow team members are looking forward to meeting you. Especially Zara Chen, our youngest research lead. She's only 27, so she understands what it's like to be the prodigy in the room. Zara Chen proved to be Lyra's first significant alliance within Hyperion. Brilliant and idealistic, she had risen quickly through the research ranks due to her exceptional talent for refining algorithmic implementations. The fellowship program usually places students on peripheral projects, Zara explained as she showed Lyra around the lab. But I requested you specifically for my team after reviewing your application materials. Your approach to variable adaptation factors is remarkably aligned with some improvements we're trying to implement. I'm flattered, Lyra replied, genuinely surprised by this stroke of luck. What specifically caught your interest? Your paper on algorithmic learning from failure cases. Most researchers focus on optimizing success patterns, but your approach of learning from suboptimal outcomes is exactly what we need for the next generation of the system. This conversation established their working relationship, with Zara quickly coming to trust Lyra's insights and giving her access to increasingly sensitive aspects of the GrowSmart system. Within 3 weeks, Lyra had gained permission to review historical code repositories, ostensibly to better understand the algorithm's evolution. It was here, deep in Hyperion's internal systems, that she found the motherlode of evidence. Original code comments in her mother's distinctive style, early documentation with Astrid's name still attached but marked for terminology standardization, and most damning of all, internal emails from the period of transition discussing the reattribution of primary research development to align with corporate narrative requirements. Carefully, without leaving digital footprints, Lyra extracted and secured this evidence, adding it to her growing collection. The picture it painted was unambiguous, a systematic effort to erase Astrid Vale from Hyperion's history and reassign credit for her innovations to Callum Rhodes. As her investigation progressed, Lyra also gained deeper insight into Hyperion's current challenges. The GrowSmart system, while still industry-leading, was facing emerging limitations. Climate change had accelerated environmental variability beyond the algorithm's original design parameters, resulting in declining performance in certain critical regions. We've hit a conceptual plateau, Zara confided during a late-night work session. The system needs a fundamental rethinking, not just incremental improvements. But that would mean admitting the current approach has limitations, which leadership is resistant to doing. This vulnerability represented an opportunity Lyra hadn't anticipated. If she could develop a solution to this critical problem, it would position her for greater access and influence within Hyperion, potentially accelerating her justice mission while simultaneously helping the communities affected by the system's declining effectiveness. Drawing on her mother's original research principles while carefully avoiding direct replication, Lyra began developing an alternative approach. She worked after hours, using her fellowship project as cover while actually creating something far more significant. "What are you still doing here?" Zara asked, finding Lyra in the lab at 10 p.m. one evening. Even the most dedicated employees go home eventually. Just following a hunch about the environmental variability issue, Lyra explained, quickly switching her screen to show only the approved project materials. "I think there might be an approach we haven't considered." Intrigued, Zara pulled up a chair. "Show me." Cautiously, Lyra shared a portion of her alternative algorithm, framing it as a theoretical exploration rather than a developed solution. "This is unconventional," Zara said slowly, studying the approach. "But mathematically elegant. Where did this concept originate?" "It's an extension of some academic work I studied at Stanford," Lyra replied, the half-truth coming easily. "Combined with principles from evolutionary adaptation theory. It's brilliant. And potentially exactly what we need." Zara looked at Lyra with new respect. "Would you be willing to develop this further? As a side project to your official fellowship work?" "Of course. I'd be honored." This exchange marked the beginning of Lyra's accelerated influence within Hyperion. Over the following weeks, her theoretical approach evolved into a functioning prototype that demonstrably outperformed the current system in high-variability environments. Zara, increasingly impressed, began sharing Lyra's work with other research leads and eventually with Dr. Sharma herself. "This is remarkably innovative," Dr. Sharma told Lyra after reviewing the preliminary results. "Especially coming from someone at your career stage. The approach has a certain, I don't know, it reminds me of something, but with a fresh perspective." "Thank you," Lyra replied, wondering if Dr. Sharma was unconsciously recognizing echoes of Astrid's work in her daughter's innovation. "It's built on fundamental principles but reimagined for current challenges." As the fellowship progressed, Lyra's solution to the variability problem gained attention beyond her immediate team. Senior researchers began attending her progress presentations. Technical directors from other divisions expressed interest in potential applications beyond agriculture. Then came the moment she had both anticipated and dreaded. During a division-wide review of promising innovations, with Lyra presenting her algorithm's latest results, the conference room door opened and Callum Rhodes himself walked in. "I've been hearing interesting things about this project," he said casually, taking a seat at the back of the room. "Please, continue." Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs as she forced herself to maintain her professional demeanor. This was the first time she had been in the same room as her father, the man who had abandoned her mother before she was born and built his fortune on stolen research. He looked older than his media images suggested, with streaks of silver at his temples and fine lines around his eyes that cameras didn't capture. Still handsome, still radiating the charismatic confidence that had helped him build his empire, but with subtle signs of the toll extracted by years at the top. "As you can see from these comparative results," Lyra continued, her voice remarkably steady despite her inner turmoil, "the adaptive protocol shows a 32% improvement in regions with high climate variability, precisely where the current system has been experiencing declining performance." She proceeded through her presentation, hyper-aware of Callum's focused attention. He asked several incisive questions that demonstrated his technical understanding remained sharp despite his primarily executive role. Lyra answered each precisely, neither deferring too much nor challenging unnecessarily, maintaining the persona of the brilliant young innovator unaware of any connection between them. After the presentation concluded, Callum approached her directly. "Impressive work, Ms. Vale," he said, extending his hand. particularly for someone still in undergraduate studies. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Lyra shook his hand, experiencing the surreal moment of physical contact with her biological father for the first time in her life. Hyperion's fellowship program has provided an exceptional learning environment. Your solution exhibits a creative approach to fundamental constraints. He studied her with an intensity that made her wonder if he saw something familiar in her features. Have we met before? Something about you seems familiar. I don't believe so, she replied calmly. This is my first time at Hyperion. He continued observing her for a moment longer. Well, keep developing this work. I'd like to see where it leads. As he turned to leave, Lyra called on every ounce of self-control not to reveal her true thoughts. This man, who spoke to her with casual professional interest, had walked away from her pregnant mother, stolen her research, and never looked back to see what became of his child. The injustice of it threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained facade. Ms. Vale shows extraordinary promise, she overheard Dr. Sharma telling Callum as they left together. Her approach has potential applications beyond the agricultural division. Keep me updated on her progress, Callum replied. Talent like that is worth nurturing. The irony nearly made Lyra laugh aloud. After 18 years of complete disinterest in his daughter's existence, Callum Rhodes now found her worth nurturing as a potential asset to his company. Following this encounter, Lyra's position within Hyperion shifted dramatically. Her fellowship received an unprecedented extension, allowing her to continue her work through the fall semester with remote participation in her Stanford courses. Resources for her project increased substantially, and she gained access to expanded data sets and computing capacity. This kind of attention from leadership is almost unheard of, Zara told her over coffee one morning. Especially for a student. Rhodes must see something special in your work. I'm just focused on solving the problem, Lyra replied modestly. The variability issue affects millions of people who depend on these agricultural systems. That's what I like about you. Most people in your position would be calculating how to leverage this for career advancement or stock options. You actually care about the impact. This growing trust allowed Lyra to expand her investigation while developing her algorithm. As a member of what was now called the Adaptation Protocol Team, she gained higher security clearances and broader access to historical documentation. Each new discovery reinforced the evidence of how systematically Astrid Vale had been erased from Hyperion's history. Lyra also began identifying potential allies for the eventual revelation. Zara clearly valued ethical considerations alongside innovation. Dr. Sharma had made several comments suggesting discomfort with how credit was allocated within Hyperion's hierarchical structure. And in the legal department, she discovered a junior counsel named Tomas Rivera who had once written a law review article about intellectual property ethics that specifically questioned the practice of corporate appropriation of individual researchers' innovations. Most surprising was her discovery about Orion Teller, Callum's longtime business partner and Hyperion's current chief strategy officer. In secured archives from Hyperion's early years, she found evidence that Orion had opposed the complete removal of Astrid's name from the Grossmart documentation, arguing for at least acknowledgement of her foundational contributions. He had been overruled by Callum and eventually acquiesced, but his initial ethical stance suggested he might be receptive to the truth even now. As Lyra's algorithm development progressed toward a fully implementable solution, her interactions with Callum Rhodes became more frequent. He began attending her team meetings, offering insights and occasionally challenging assumptions in a way that demonstrated his genuine interest in the technology. Your adaptation protocol reminds me of some early conceptual work we did at Hyperion, he commented after one particularly successful demonstration. Before Grossmart was fully developed. There's an elegant simplicity to the approach that's quite distinctive. Thank you, Lyra replied, wondering if he was unconsciously recognizing his ex-wife's intellectual influence in his daughter's work. Fundamental principles often have a recognizable elegance. These interactions created an increasingly complex emotional landscape for Lyra. On one hand, she observed firsthand the brilliant mind and visionary thinking that had attracted her mother years ago. On the other, she witnessed the moral compromises, the casual appropriation of others' contributions, and the self-mythologizing that had become integral to Callum's identity as a technology visionary. "He's not a cartoon villain," she wrote in her private journal one night. "That would be simpler. He genuinely believes in the transformative potential of technology. He's capable of kindness, humor, and genuine appreciation of others' intelligence. And yet he built everything on a foundation of theft and abandonment, then constructed a narrative that erased not just my mother but his own moral failing. The complexity makes the betrayal worse somehow, not better." As her algorithm neared completion, Hyperion began preparations for its annual Innovation Summit, where major technological advances were unveiled to investors, partners, and the media. To Lyra's carefully concealed shock, her adaptation protocol was selected as one of the featured presentations, with Callum himself requesting that she deliver it despite her junior status. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Sharma told her when conveying the news. "Fellows don't present at the Innovation Summit, ever. But Rhodes insists that the breakthrough deserves to be highlighted, and that as its primary architect, you should receive the recognition." The irony was almost too perfect. Callum Rhodes, who had systematically erased Astrid Vale's contributions and claimed them as his own, now insisted on proper attribution for Lyra's work, unaware that she was the daughter whose existence he had rejected. This development accelerated Lyra's timeline significantly. The Innovation Summit would bring together Hyperion's leadership, board members, major investors, and media representatives. It represented the perfect forum for revealing the truth about Grossmart's origins and Callum's betrayal of her mother. But such a public revelation carried significant risks. Without careful preparation, it could be dismissed as the unfounded accusation of a disgruntled student. Worse, it could trigger legal action against Astrid for violating her non-disclosure agreement, even if Lyra was the one making the claims. With the summit 6 weeks away, Lyra began the most delicate phase of her operation, consolidating her evidence and building a disclosure strategy that would be impossible to dismiss or suppress. She identified key internal allies who might support the truth once revealed, prepared documentation packages tailored to different audiences, and created secure backups of all evidence in case Hyperion attempted to destroy or alter records once her intentions became clear. Most critically, she developed a technical proof that would be indisputable to anyone with expertise in the field. Using her access to Hyperion's code repositories, she created a comparative analysis that visually demonstrated the direct lineage from Astrid's original algorithm to the current Grossmart system, including her mother's embedded signature that had remained hidden in the code for 18 years. Throughout these preparations, Lyra maintained her cover as the dedicated young innovator, continuing to refine her adaptation protocol while participating in summit preparation meetings with increasing seniority. Callum himself conducted her final presentation review, offering suggestions that she incorporated with professional appreciation despite her internal conflict. "You remind me of someone," he said at the conclusion of their meeting, studying her with that same puzzled expression she'd noticed in their first encounter. "There's something in how you approach problems, a particular intellectual signature." "I've been influenced by many great thinkers," Lyra replied neutrally. "We all build on those who came before us." "Indeed we do." He smiled slightly. "Though some influences are more acknowledged than others." The comment, which could have been entirely innocent, sent a chill through Lyra. Did he suspect something? Had she revealed too much of her mother's intellectual patterns in her work? 2 weeks before the summit, as Lyra was finalizing both her technical presentation and her revelation strategy, a new development threatened to derail everything. Hyperion announced a major global expansion of Grossmart implementation, targeting regions most affected by climate change with what the press release called next-generation adaptive algorithms to ensure food security in vulnerable communities. Reviewing the technical specifications, Lyra realized with shock that the expansion was incorporating fundamental elements of her adaptation protocol, which was still in final testing, combined with the original Grossmart system. The announcement credited Hyperion's research team led by Callum Rhodes with the integrated innovation. "Did you know about this?" she demanded of Zara, showing her the press release in their lab the morning after the announcement. "Not until yesterday," Zara admitted, looking uncomfortable. "They've been fast-tracking integration of your protocol into the core system. Rhodes is personally overseeing the implementation. Without completing the validation testing we specified." "That's dangerous. I raised those concerns. So did Dr. Sharma. But the executive team considers the preliminary results sufficient, and the market opportunity too significant to delay." This accelerated deployment created both a crisis and an opportunity for Lyra's plans. On one hand, Callum was once again appropriating someone else's innovation, this time her own work built on the foundation of her mother's stolen research. The pattern was repeating itself exactly, confirming his unchanged character despite the passing years. On the other hand, the high-profile nature of the announcement and the hasty implementation created vulnerability. If there were flaws in the integrated system, if the premature deployment led to problems, it would create an opening for challenging not just this decision but the entire narrative Callum had constructed around Hyperion's agricultural technology. As Lyra contemplated this development, her phone chimed with an unexpected message. It was from her mother. "We need to talk tonight. Important. Please call when you can." A cold wave of anxiety washed over her. Had Astrid somehow discovered her true activities at Hyperion? Or was this about something else entirely? That evening, from her corporate apartment provided by the extended fellowship, Lyra called home with apprehension. "Mom. Is everything okay?" "I'm not sure," Astrid replied, her voice tense. "I received a strange email today from someone at Hyperion, someone named Orion Teller." Lyra's breath caught. Callum's business partner had reached out to her mother directly. What did he want? He said they're preparing for the Innovation Summit and doing some historical documentation review. He asked if I would be willing to discuss my early contributions to what became the GroSmart system, for what he called internal historical accuracy purposes. That's unexpected, Lyra managed, mind racing. What did you tell him? Nothing yet. I wanted to talk to you first, since you're there. Is something happening at Hyperion that I should know about? Some reason they're suddenly interested in acknowledging my existence after 18 years. Lyra closed her eyes, weighing her options. The moment had come to be honest with her mother, but doing so over the phone felt wrong. Yet waiting risked Astrid responding to Teller without understanding the full situation. "Mom, I need to tell you something important, but not over the phone. Can you come to San Francisco this weekend? I'll explain everything then." "Lyra, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "I promise it's nothing bad. Just complicated. Please trust me. Come Friday evening, and I'll tell you everything." After a long pause, Astrid agreed. "All right. But whatever is happening, please be careful. Hyperion and especially Callum Rhodes operate by different rules than the rest of the world." "I know, Mom," Lyra replied, thinking of how thoroughly she had come to understand that reality. "Better than you might think." The call ended with Lyra facing a critical juncture in her plans. Orion Teller's outreach to Astrid suggested someone at Hyperion was asking questions about the past, perhaps recognizing similarities between Lyra's work and her mother's original research. The carefully constructed timeline she had developed was collapsing, forcing her to accelerate her strategy. The Innovation Summit was 10 days away. Her mother would arrive in 3 days. And somewhere within Hyperion, questions were being raised about the true origins of the technology that had built an empire. Lyra sat at her desk and opened a new document. The title she typed was simple but momentous. Contingency Plan, Immediate Implementation. The time for careful preparation had ended. The final confrontation was approaching faster than she had anticipated, forcing her to adapt just as her algorithm had been designed to do. Soon, Callum Rhodes would come face to face not just with the truth about Hyperion's flagship technology, but with the daughter whose existence he had denied for 18 years. The hours before Astrid's arrival stretched endlessly for Lyra. She had prepared her corporate apartment meticulously, not just for her mother's comfort but for the critical conversation they needed to have. Documents were organized, evidence compiled, and presentation materials prepared with the same precision she brought to her scientific work. On Friday evening, the sound of the doorbell sent a jolt of nervous energy through her body. When she opened the door, the familiar sight of her mother brought both comfort and anxiety. "This is quite a place," Astrid remarked, taking in the sleek modern furnishings of the Hyperion-provided accommodation. "Fellowship perks have certainly improved since my day. It's just for the extended program." Lyra hugged her mother tightly. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too." Astrid pulled back, studying her daughter's face. "Now, what's so important that it couldn't be discussed over the phone?" Lyra took a deep breath. "Let's sit down. This is going to take some time." In the living room, with cups of tea growing cold between them, Lyra began the confession she had rehearsed countless times in her mind. "Mom, I haven't been completely honest with you about my work at Hyperion. Or rather, about why I wanted to work there in the first place." Astrid's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "What do you mean?" "2 years ago, when I discovered the truth about Callum and your research, I made a decision." Lyra's voice was steady despite her nerves. "I decided that the injustice done to you needed to be corrected, and I developed a plan to make that happen." "Lyra, what have you done?" Alarm crept into Astrid's tone. "I've been gathering evidence. Systematically, methodically documenting how Callum Rhodes built Hyperion on your stolen research." Lyra gestured to the organized files on her dining table. "Everything from the original algorithm with your embedded signature to internal emails discussing the reattribution of your work to Callum. It's all there, indisputable proof of what happened 18 years ago." Astrid stood abruptly, pacing the room as she processed this revelation. "You deliberately sought the fellowship at Hyperion for this? You've been investigating all this time?" "Yes. And I've found everything we need to prove the truth." "But why?" Astrid stopped, facing her daughter directly. "That agreement I signed, the legal consequences. Lyra, this could destroy everything you've worked for." "I'm not bound by your agreement, Mom. I never signed anything promising silence about Callum's theft. But I did. And if this becomes public, Hyperion's lawyers will come after me regardless of who made the revelation." Lyra moved to the table, retrieving a specific document. "Actually, they can't. I found a critical flaw in the agreement you signed. It prohibits you from making claims about the intellectual property or disparaging Hyperion and Callum. But it doesn't extend to third-party revelations, even if they benefit you, as long as you weren't the source." Astrid took the document, scanning it with the careful attention of someone who had learned the hard way about legal fine print. "Even if that's true, which I'm not convinced it is, why risk everything for this? We've built a good life without Callum's acknowledgement or money. This isn't about money." Lyra's voice intensified with passion. "It's about truth. About justice. About the fact that the work you created to help people has been restricted, commercialized, and controlled by someone who stole it and then abandoned us both." Astrid sat heavily on the couch, the weight of her daughter's words settling over her. "How far have you taken this, Lyra? What exactly are you planning?" "I'm presenting at Hyperion's Innovation Summit next week. My adaptation protocol for the GrowSmart system. It solves a critical flaw they've been struggling with for years. And I'm going to use that platform to reveal the truth. About the original algorithm, about Callum's theft, about everything." The silence that followed was deafening. Astrid closed her eyes, absorbing the magnitude of what her daughter was proposing. "You would destroy your own career before it's even begun," she finally said. The technology industry doesn't reward whistleblowers, no matter how justified. Some things are more important than career advancement. Lyra knelt beside her mother. You taught me that, Mom. You taught me that integrity and truth matter more than success built on lies. I never taught you to sacrifice yourself on the altar of justice. Astrid took her daughter's hands. Listen to me carefully. Callum Rhodes isn't just a successful businessman. He has built his entire identity on being the visionary behind Hyperion's technology. If you threaten that narrative publicly, he won't just defend himself legally. He'll do whatever it takes to discredit you, to paint you as unstable or dishonest or opportunistic. Let him try. Lyra's determination was unwavering. I've prepared for every contingency. The evidence is irrefutable, secured in multiple locations, ready for distribution to key industry figures, journalists, and board members. And what about Orion Teller? Where does his message to me fit into all this? Lyra frowned slightly. That's the one variable I haven't fully accounted for. Teller was the only executive who originally opposed erasing your contributions. Based on my research, he eventually acquiesced to Callum's demands, but never seemed entirely comfortable with the decision. So why reach out now, after 18 years? I think, Lyra said slowly, he might have recognized something in my work. Some echo of your approach that raised questions. He's been attending my project briefings recently, asking pointed questions about methodological influences. And you think he suspects who you are? That you're not just a brilliant student who happens to have the same last name as Callum's ex-wife? I don't know. But his contacting you directly suggests he's putting pieces together. Astrid stood again, moving to the window that overlooked the glittering city. For several minutes she said nothing, lost in thought as she stared at the skyline where Hyperion's headquarters stood prominently illuminated against the night. I need to see it, she finally said. All of it. The evidence you've gathered, your presentation plan, everything. Through the night, Lyra walked her mother through the extensive documentation she had compiled. Astrid reviewed code comparisons, internal emails, financial analyses, and the technical proof that demonstrated the direct lineage from her original algorithm to the current GrowSmart system. This is remarkably thorough, Astrid admitted as dawnlight began filtering through the windows. More comprehensive than anything I could have assembled myself. So you understand why I have to do this? Why the truth needs to come out? Astrid looked at her daughter, seeing both the determination she had inherited from both her parents and a wisdom beyond her years. I understand why you want to. But Lyra, there's something important you haven't considered. What's that? What this will do to you. Not professionally, but personally. Astrid's expression softened with concern. Confronting Callum this way, publicly revealing yourself as the daughter he abandoned, forcing him to face his betrayal of us both, it will change you. Vengeance, even when dressed as justice, extracts a price from those who pursue it. This isn't about vengeance, Lyra insisted. It's about correcting a wrong that has had far-reaching consequences. Not just for us, but for all the people who could have benefited from your work if it hadn't been locked behind Hyperion's patents and pricing. Perhaps. But I need you to answer one question honestly. Astrid held her daughter's gaze steadily. If Callum Rhodes weren't your father, if this were someone else's story of intellectual theft, would you be pursuing it with the same intensity? The question landed with unexpected force, forcing Lyra to confront her deepest motivations. After a long moment, she answered truthfully. No. I wouldn't. The personal connection matters. The fact that he abandoned you when you were pregnant with me, that he never once tried to know his own daughter, that makes the intellectual theft more unforgivable, not less. Astrid nodded, appreciating the honesty. Then acknowledged that this is personal, and that personal vendettas, however justified, can consume you if you're not careful. What are you saying, Mom? That I should abandon the plan? Let him continue building his legacy on your stolen work? I'm saying that whatever you decide to do, be honest with yourself about why you're doing it. And consider what outcome would truly represent justice, not just punishment. They talked until morning light filled the apartment, discussing alternatives, weighing consequences, and examining Lyra's meticulously constructed plan from every angle. By the time exhaustion finally overcame them both, a modified strategy had emerged, one that honored truth while creating potential for resolution beyond mere exposure. "Get some sleep," Astrid told her daughter, gently guiding her toward the bedroom. "We'll continue this discussion later. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." As Lyra finally drifted into uneasy sleep, her phone chimed with a message. Checking it through bleary eyes, she felt a surge of adrenaline that instantly dispelled her fatigue. "Ms. Vale, I'd appreciate the opportunity to speak with you privately before Monday's presentation preparations. My office, 2 p.m. today. Orion Teller, Chief Strategy Officer." She showed the message to Astrid, who had been heading to the guest room. "It seems Mr. Teller wants to talk to you too," Astrid observed, the concern evident in her voice. "What will you do?" "I'll meet him. This could be crucial information for our adjusted approach. Be careful, Lyra. Remember, Teller has been Callum's right hand for 2 decades. Whatever qualms he may have had about my erasure, his loyalty ultimately lies with Hyperion." "I know. I'll reveal nothing about our plan. But I need to understand what he knows or suspects." Sleep came fitfully for both women, their minds racing with possibilities and concerns. When Lyra woke a few hours later, she found Astrid already up, reviewing the evidence files again with the careful attention of a scientist searching for overlooked details. "There's something I don't understand," Astrid said without preamble. "These implementation specifications for the expanded GrossMart deployment. They incorporate elements of your adaptation protocol, but there are modifications that seem unnecessarily complex." Lyra joined her mother at the dining table, examining the technical documentation. "You're right. These adjustments don't improve functionality. If anything, they create potential instability in variable climate conditions." "Exactly. It's almost as if someone deliberately complicated the integration to make it less effective than your original design." This observation added a troubling new dimension to the situation. Was someone at Hyperion intentionally compromising the technology? And if so, why? As Lyra prepared to meet with Orion Teller, she and Astrid agreed on careful boundaries for the conversation. She would listen more than speak, reveal nothing of their plans or evidence, and focus on understanding Teller's agenda without committing to any course of action. Hyperion's headquarters felt different on a Saturday, the usual bustle replaced by quiet emptiness as Lyra made her way to the executive floor. Orion Teller's office occupied the corner position adjacent to Callum's even larger space, a physical manifestation of their long partnership. "Ms. Vale, thank you for coming on short notice," Teller greeted her as his assistant showed her in. In his early 60s, he retained the sharp intellect and careful observation that had helped build Hyperion, though his manner was more measured than Callum's charismatic intensity. "Of course, Mr. Teller. I'm honored by the invitation." He gestured to a seating area with a view of the bay, more casual than the imposing desk arrangement. "I've been following your work with considerable interest. The adaptation protocol represents a significant advancement for our agricultural systems." "Thank you. It's been a challenging but rewarding project." "Indeed." Teller studied her with penetrating intensity. "What's particularly interesting is the fundamental approach you've taken. It has a certain signature to it. A specific way of conceptualizing adaptive responses to environmental variables." Lyra maintained her composed expression despite her racing heart. "I've been influenced by various academic approaches during my studies." "No doubt." Teller leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Vale, I'm going to be direct. I've been with Hyperion since its founding. I've seen the evolution of every major technology we've developed, including the original GrossMart system. I understand it was revolutionary when first introduced. It was. And remains so. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Your adaptation protocol integrates so seamlessly with the original architecture that it suggests an unusual degree of compatibility in the underlying thinking. Lyra said nothing, waiting for him to continue. I knew your mother, Ms. Vale. Astrid was brilliant, possibly the most innovative researcher I've ever encountered. The direct acknowledgement sent a shock through Lyra, though she worked to keep her reaction minimal. You've been in touch with her recently, I understand. If Teller was surprised by her awareness of this fact, he didn't show it. Yes. After observing your work, I felt it was time to revisit certain historical decisions regarding attribution and recognition. Why now, after 18 years? Because history has a way of repeating itself when lessons remain unlearned. Teller's expression turned grimmer. The current GrowSmart expansion implementation has been modified from your original design in ways that concern me deeply. These modifications were directed by Callum personally, over objections from the technical team. This confirmation of what Astrid had noticed earlier sent alarm bells ringing. Why would anyone deliberately complicate a functional design? That's precisely what I've been trying to determine. Teller stood, moving to a secure cabinet from which he retrieved a folder. These are the projected performance metrics for the modified implementation, based on simulation data that hasn't been shared with your team. Lyra reviewed the documents, a chill spreading through her as she processed the implications. These indicate potential critical failures in high-stress environmental conditions, exactly where the system is most needed. Yes. Yet the implementation proceeds at an accelerated pace, without proper testing or validation. I don't understand. Why would Callum Rhodes push forward with a flawed implementation? Teller's expression was grave. Because Hyperion is positioning for acquisition. Nexus Global has offered $22 billion, contingent on successful deployment of the expanded GrowSmart system by year-end. Any delay or admission of technical limitations would jeopardize the deal. So millions of people depending on these agricultural systems are being placed at risk for a corporate acquisition? Lyra couldn't keep the disgust from her voice. It appears so. When I raised concerns, I was reminded that my retirement package depends on the acquisition proceeding as planned. Teller's smile was without humor. Hence my sudden interest in historical accuracy and correcting past mistakes. You want to stop the acquisition by exposing problems with the implementation. I want to ensure that technology designed to help humanity isn't compromised for financial gain. Something your mother also believed in, as I recall. Lyra considered her next words carefully. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Teller? I believe your presentation at the Innovation Summit provides an opportunity to highlight the technical concerns with the modified implementation. As the principal architect of the adaptation protocol, your assessment carries significant weight. That would delay the acquisition but wouldn't address the broader issues of attribution and recognition. Perhaps both concerns could be addressed simultaneously. Teller's gaze was knowing. With the right approach and the right evidence. The implication hung in the air between them. He was offering himself as an ally, but Lyra remained cautious. What makes you think I have any interest in issues beyond the technical integrity of my work? Because you're Astrid Vale's daughter, and from what I've observed, you've inherited not just her brilliant mind but her ethical compass as well. Teller handed her another document. This is my personal testimony regarding the development of the original GrowSmart system, including specific documentation of your mother's foundational contributions and the subsequent decision to reassign credit. I've prepared it for release if necessary. Lyra scanned the document, recognizing its value as supporting evidence from a Hyperion insider. Why would you risk your position this way? Because I've spent 18 years regretting my silence when Callum made those decisions. My retirement means little if I can't face myself in the mirror. Teller checked his watch. Callum returns from London tonight. The final presentation review is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. Whatever you decide to do, I suggest you do it before then. As Lyra left Teller's office, her mind worked furiously to incorporate this new information into their strategy. The situation had grown more complex, with lives potentially at risk from the flawed implementation, but also with an unexpected ally in a position of significant influence. Back at her apartment, she found Astrid still reviewing documents, now with pages of her own notes alongside. "How did it go with Teller?" Astrid asked immediately. "He knows who I am. Who we are." Lyra placed Teller's testimony on the table. "And he's provided evidence supporting your role in developing the original technology." Astrid picked up the document, reading it with growing amazement. "This is remarkably detailed. And damning for Callum. There's more." Lyra quickly explained about the flawed implementation and the pending acquisition. "It's worse than we thought, Mom. This isn't just about intellectual theft anymore. It's about knowingly deploying compromised technology that could fail when people need it most, all to secure a massive payout." Astrid's expression hardened. "That changes everything. If lives are at risk, we can't wait or rely on standard corporate accountability measures." "Exactly. Which means our approach needs to be adjusted accordingly." Through the remainder of the day and late into the night, they refined their strategy, incorporating the new information and Teller's potential alliance. The plan evolved from simply exposing past injustice to preventing future harm, creating a narrative that would be impossible for Hyperion's board or the technology community to ignore. Sunday morning brought new urgency as Lyra received notification that Callum had requested a private review of her presentation before the scheduled technical team meeting. "He's trying to get ahead of this," Astrid observed. "Teller must have raised enough concerns that Callum wants to assess the situation himself. Or he's recognized something in my work that's making him suspicious." Lyra checked the notification details. "The meeting is set for noon in his private office. Are you ready for that? To face him one-on-one?" Lyra took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The hours before the meeting were spent in final preparation. Lyra created two versions of her presentation, the official one focusing purely on technical aspects of the adaptation protocol, and a second, hidden version that included the evidence of intellectual theft and the flawed implementation concerns. "Remember," Astrid advised as Lyra prepared to leave, "whatever happens today is just preliminary. The real moment comes at the summit. Don't reveal too much too soon." "I know, Mom. I'll be careful." Lyra hugged her mother tightly. "Whatever happens, I'm glad we're facing this together now." Callum Rhodes' private office occupied the entire top floor of Hyperion's East Wing, with panoramic views of the city and bay. When Lyra arrived, his assistant informed her he was running slightly late but would be with her shortly. This gave her a few minutes to absorb the space that represented the pinnacle of his success, the empire built on stolen innovation. The walls displayed awards, recognitions, and photographs documenting Hyperion's rise and Callum's emergence as a technology visionary. What struck Lyra most was the complete absence of any reference to the company's early years, when Astrid had been part of the leadership team. The historical narrative began after her removal, with Callum consistently centered as the sole visionary behind their breakthrough technologies. "Ms. Vale, thank you for accommodating my schedule." Lyra turned to find Callum entering from a private elevator, his travel fatigue masked by the impeccable presentation that was his trademark. She had prepared extensively for this moment, yet the reality of standing face to face with her father, both of them aware of their connection but only one acknowledging it, sent an unexpected surge of emotion through her. "Thank you for making time so soon after your return, Mr. Rhodes. Your adaptation protocol has generated considerable excitement. I wanted to discuss it personally before tomorrow's technical review." He gestured to a seating area overlooking the bay. "Shall we?" As they sat, Lyra connected her tablet to the room's presentation system, pulling up the technical version of her slides. "I've prepared an overview of the key innovations for your review. Before we get to that, I'd like to address something that's been puzzling me." Callum studied her with the penetrating focus that had intimidated business rivals for years. Your approach to algorithmic adaptation has a distinctive quality that's remarkably familiar. Almost as if you had access to the original conceptual framework of the GrowSmart system, not just the current implementation. The implication was clear: he was testing whether she had somehow obtained proprietary historical information. What he couldn't know was that the familiarity came from a much more fundamental source, the intellectual inheritance from mother to daughter. I've studied the publicly available information on GrowSmart extensively, Lyra replied truthfully. Including academic papers that predated the commercial system. A slight narrowing of his eyes suggested he caught the reference. Academic papers are rarely comprehensive regarding proprietary technologies. True innovation doesn't emerge from nothing, Mr. Rhodes. We all build on foundations laid by others. The subtle challenge hung in the air between them. Callum's expression shifted almost imperceptibly before he redirected the conversation. Your presentation tomorrow is generating significant interest among our partners and investors. The adaptation protocol represents a potential step change in system performance. If implemented correctly, Lyra noted carefully. I understand there have been some modifications to the deployment specifications. This time his reaction was more visible, a momentary tension in his posture. Technical refinements are standard in any implementation process. Even refinements that potentially compromise system stability in high-stress conditions. Callum's expression hardened. You seem to have access to information beyond your project scope, Ms. Vale. I'm thorough in my analysis, Mr. Rhodes. It's what makes my work effective. The tension between them escalated, neither willing to retreat from the unspoken challenge. Finally, Callum leaned forward slightly. Let me be direct. Your work at Hyperion has been impressive, your contributions valued. But corporate technology development involves complex considerations beyond pure technical optimization. The decisions regarding GrowSmart implementation have been made at the appropriate executive level. Even decisions that could result in system failures affecting millions of people. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Vale. One I would advise against making publicly without irrefutable evidence. Evidence like modified implementation specifications with your personal approval signature. Or simulation data showing critical vulnerabilities under conditions common in target deployment regions. Callum's expression shifted to cold calculation. I don't know what you think you've discovered, or who has been sharing confidential information with you, but Hyperion takes intellectual property and confidentiality extremely seriously. Making unfounded claims about our technologies could have significant legal consequences. I'm well aware of how Hyperion approaches intellectual property, Mr. Rhodes. Lyra met his gaze steadily. In fact, I've been studying that topic with particular interest. Have you? It wasn't a question but a recognition that the conversation had moved into more dangerous territory. And what conclusions have you drawn from this study? That attribution matters. That taking credit for others' innovations might be profitable in the short term, but ultimately creates vulnerabilities that can never be fully secured. Understanding dawned in Callum's eyes, along with a new wariness. Who are you, really? What is this about? Lyra maintained her composure, though her heart raced with the confrontation 18 years in the making. I believe you already know, or at least suspect. The question is whether you're prepared to address it honestly before it's addressed for you. Callum stood abruptly, moving to the window with his back to her as he processed the implications of her words. When he turned, his expression was carefully controlled. If you're implying what I think you are, you should know that making such claims without substantiation would be career-ending. Hyperion's legal team would ensure that. I'm not concerned about substantiation, Mr. Rhodes. I'm concerned about truth. About justice. And about preventing harm from a flawed technology implementation being rushed for financial gain. What exactly do you want? His voice had taken on a dangerous edge. Recognition of Astrid Vale's foundational contributions to GrowSmart. Correction of the historical record. And immediate suspension of the flawed implementation until the adaptation protocol can be properly integrated without compromising safety. Impossible. The Nexus acquisition depends on the current implementation timeline. Billions of dollars and Hyperion's future are at stake. More important than people's lives. Then the truth. The truth, Callum said coldly, is whatever narrative prevails. And in this case, that narrative has been established for 18 years. No one would believe a revision now, especially from an unproven student with obvious personal motivation. I wouldn't be so certain. Lyra stood, gathering her materials. The Innovation Summit seems like an appropriate forum to test that theory. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a choice. Address these issues privately, correctly, or have them addressed publicly, completely. Either way, the truth emerges. Callum's face hardened into the expression that had intimidated countless business rivals. You have no idea who you're dealing with or what forces you're attempting to challenge. Whatever you think you know, whatever evidence you believe you have, it won't be enough against Hyperion's resources. Perhaps not, Lyra conceded. But are you willing to risk everything you've built on that assumption? Your reputation, your legacy, this acquisition you've staked so much on. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing you should consider, Mr. Rhodes. I'm not just Astrid Vale's daughter. I'm your daughter too. And I inherited more than just her brilliant mind. I inherited your strategic thinking, your determination, your willingness to do whatever it takes to achieve a goal. Think about that before you decide how to proceed. The shock that registered on his face was the first genuine emotion he had displayed during their entire exchange. Lyra left without waiting for his response, her heart pounding but her resolve stronger than ever. When she returned to her apartment, she found Astrid waiting anxiously. How did it go? Her mother asked immediately. He knows. Or at least, he knows enough to be worried. Lyra set down her materials. I made it clear that he has a choice between addressing the issues privately or having them exposed publicly. And his reaction? Threats, dismissal, the usual tactics of someone used to power. But I saw something else too, when I told him explicitly that I'm his daughter. Real shock. Maybe even fear. Astrid nodded slowly. Callum Rhodes has spent 2 decades carefully constructing his narrative and protecting it from any challenges. The idea that his own daughter might be the one to dismantle it, that would shake even his confidence. He'll fight back. Probably already is, marshalling legal resources, preparing counter-narratives, looking for ways to discredit me. Which is why we need to move quickly. Astrid picked up her phone. I've been thinking about contingencies while you were gone. I think it's time to bring in additional allies. The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Based on Astrid's suggestions, Lyra reached out to select individuals who could provide critical support when the truth emerged. Dr. Marcus Reeves from Meridian Biotechnologies, who had mentored her during her internship. Phoenix Wright, the investigative journalist whose lecture had helped shape her strategy. And most surprisingly, Judge Elena Farrow, who had ruled on several significant intellectual property cases and happened to be an old friend of Astrid's from her university days. Meanwhile, Astrid made her own preparations, contacting former colleagues who had witnessed her early work on the algorithm and could corroborate its origins. She also prepared a comprehensive technical analysis demonstrating the flaws in the modified implementation, information that would be crucial if Hyperion attempted to discredit Lyra's claims about safety concerns. By Monday morning, the day before the Innovation Summit, their alliance had expanded significantly. Orion Teller provided confirmation that Callum had been in emergency meetings with legal counsel and key executives through the night, though the specific focus remained confidential. He's preparing a defense, Lyra concluded. But he can't know exactly what evidence we have or how we plan to present it. Which gives us an advantage, Astrid agreed. But only if we use it correctly. The final technical review for summit presentations was scheduled for 3 p.m. As Lyra prepared to leave, Astrid embraced her tightly. Be careful. Callum at his most threatened is Callum at his most dangerous. I know. But we're past the point where caution alone will protect us. When Lyra arrived at Hyperion for the review, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Security procedures had been intensified, with additional checks before she could access the research floors. When she reached the conference room where the review was scheduled, she found not the usual technical team but a group of unfamiliar executives and legal representatives. Ms. Vale, a woman in a severe suit, greeted her. I'm Veronica Slater, Hyperion's chief legal counsel. We need to discuss some concerning developments before the technical review can proceed. What developments would those be? Lyra asked, maintaining her composure despite the obvious ambush. Information has come to our attention suggesting you may have accessed confidential Hyperion intellectual property without authorization. Additionally, there are questions about potential conflicts of interest regarding your fellowship placement. So this was Callum's countermove. An attempt to intimidate her with legal threats and possibly remove her from the summit program entirely. I've accessed only the materials necessary for my assigned projects, with appropriate authorization from Dr. Sharma and my team lead. That will need to be verified through a comprehensive audit. Slater's tone was coldly professional. In the meantime, your summit presentation has been reassigned to Dr. Chen, who will be adapting your materials appropriately. On whose authority? Mr. Rhodes personally. He sends his regrets but felt this was necessary given the circumstances. Lyra considered her options carefully. Direct confrontation now would only escalate the situation before they were ready. A strategic retreat would preserve their element of surprise for the summit itself. I understand. Will there be anything else? The lawyer seemed slightly surprised by her easy acquiescence. You'll need to surrender your access credentials and any company devices pending investigation. Lyra handed over her Hyperion badge and corporate laptop, having already secured all critical evidence elsewhere. Is that all? For now. We may have additional questions as the investigation proceeds. As Lyra left Hyperion headquarters, she immediately contacted Orion Teller through the secure channel they had established. Callum's made his move. I've been removed from the summit program and placed under investigation. I anticipated something like this, Teller replied. But it doesn't change anything. Your summit access credentials are still valid, they've only revoked your system access. And I've ensured your presentation remains in the program database, though officially reassigned to Dr. Chen. Can you get a message to Zara? She needs to know what's happening. Already done. She's concerned but prepared to support the truth when the moment comes. Back at her apartment, Lyra found Astrid engaged in an intense conversation with Phoenix Wright, who had arrived while she was at Hyperion. They've moved against me earlier than expected, Lyra announced, explaining what had happened. Wright nodded, unsurprised. Classic corporate damage control strategy. Remove the perceived threat, control the narrative, minimize potential exposure. But they don't realize we're prepared for this, Astrid pointed out. The summit itself now becomes our best opportunity, precisely because they believe they've neutralized the threat. Exactly, Lyra agreed. They'll be focused on the legal investigation and controlling my access to Hyperion systems. They won't expect a direct confrontation at the summit itself. The plan crystallized in its final form. No longer would it be a carefully staged revelation during Lyra's presentation. Instead, it would be a more dramatic intervention during Callum's keynote address, when investors, media, and industry leaders would all be present. It's riskier, Wright cautioned. Security will be tight, and without official presenter status, your access to the stage will be limited. Not if I have help, Lyra replied, looking at Teller's latest message. And it appears we will. The night before the summit, as final preparations were completed, Astrid found Lyra sitting quietly on the apartment balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Second thoughts?" she asked gently, joining her daughter. "Not about exposing the truth. But..." Lyra hesitated. "I've been so focused on justice for you, on holding him accountable, that I never really considered what it means to finally confront my father face to face. Not just as an adversary, but as the daughter he never wanted." Astrid took her hand. "It's not too late to adjust our approach. We can focus solely on the technical concerns, leave the personal history for another time." "No. The two are inseparable. His theft of your work and his abandonment of us both come from the same place, the same fundamental character flaw. The willingness to discard people and principles for ambition." Lyra squeezed her mother's hand. "I'm ready. I just needed to acknowledge what this really means." The morning of the Innovation Summit dawned clear and bright, a perfect California day that seemed at odds with the confrontation to come. Hyperion had transformed its central atrium into a showcase for the company's vision of the future, with demonstrations of emerging technologies surrounding a central stage where keynote addresses would be delivered. Astrid and Lyra arrived separately, implementing their carefully coordinated plan. Astrid, using credentials Phoenix Wright had arranged through his media connections, entered as part of the press contingent covering the event. Lyra, still possessing her valid summit access badge, entered through the regular attendee channel, though she kept a low profile, aware that security might have been instructed to watch for her. The summit opened with standard corporate pageantry, highlighting Hyperion's achievements and market position. Various executives delivered presentations on different aspects of the company's technology portfolio, building toward Callum's keynote address, which would unveil the expanded GrowSmart implementation that had become central to the Nexus acquisition. Throughout the morning, Lyra maintained communication with their allies through secure messaging. Orion Teller confirmed his position near the technical control systems. Zarachin indicated her readiness to support the technical claims about implementation flaws. And most crucially, Dr. Marcus Reeves from Meridian had arrived with several other industry experts who could validate the evidence of intellectual theft. As Callum's keynote approached, Lyra moved into position near one of the side access points to the main stage area. From her vantage point, she could see security personnel scanning the crowd, likely looking for her specifically. She also spotted her mother among the media section, maintaining her cover while positioning herself to document what was about to unfold. The atrium lights dimmed, and Callum Rhodes took the stage to enthusiastic applause. Impeccably dressed and radiating confident authority, he embodied the visionary CEO persona he had cultivated for decades. "Welcome to Hyperion's annual Innovation Summit," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "For 20 years, we've been at the forefront of technological transformation, creating solutions that address humanity's greatest challenges." The irony of this claim was not lost on Lyra as she waited for the precise moment to intervene. Callum continued his carefully crafted narrative, highlighting Hyperion's achievements and building toward the announcement of the expanded GrowSmart implementation. "Today, we take our commitment to global food security to the next level," he announced, as visualizations of the system appeared on massive screens behind him. The next-generation GrowSmart system will deploy across 27 countries, increasing agricultural productivity in regions most impacted by climate variability. This was the moment. As Callum began detailing the implementation specifics, Lyra received the confirmation signal from Teller. The security protocols for the presentation system had been temporarily suspended, allowing her to initiate their prepared intervention. On the massive screens behind Callum, his presentation was suddenly replaced by split-screen technical documentation. On one side, Astrid Vale's original algorithm with her embedded signature highlighted. On the other, the current GrowSmart code showing the direct lineage from the original work. Below both, a simulation demonstrating the critical vulnerabilities in the modified implementation Callum was describing. The audience stirred with confusion as Callum faltered, turning to see the unexpected change in his presentation materials. Before security could respond, Lyra stepped onto the stage from the side access point, her voice amplified by the wireless microphone Teller had ensured would be active. Mr. Rhodes, perhaps you could explain to our audience why the foundation of Hyperion's most valuable technology contains the signature of Astrid Vale, the researcher whose contributions you erased from company history 18 years ago. The murmur from the audience grew louder as Callum's expression shifted from momentary shock to controlled anger. This is an unauthorized interruption. Security, please remove this person immediately. But Lyra continued, her voice steady as she advanced across the stage. Or perhaps you could explain why the current implementation contains critical vulnerabilities that your own technical team has warned could cause system failures in the very regions most dependent on this technology. Security personnel moved toward the stage, but hesitated as Phoenix Wright stood from the media section, his own voice carrying through the space. As a member of the accredited press covering this event, I would be very interested in hearing Mr. Rhodes' response to these technical questions, which appear to be supported by Hyperion's own internal documentation. The strategic intervention created exactly the pause they had needed. From different sections of the audience, their allies rose one by one. Dr. Marcus Reeves, recognized as a leading authority in the field. Judge Elena Farrow, whose expertise in intellectual property gave her words particular weight. And finally, Astrid Vale herself, stepping forward from the media section to stand visible to both Callum and the entire audience. Callum's gaze locked on Astrid, recognition and something like fear crossing his features before his professional mask reasserted itself. This appears to be a coordinated attempt to disrupt our summit with unfounded accusations. I assure our guests that Hyperion stands behind the integrity of our technologies and the accuracy of our corporate history. Are you denying that Astrid Vale developed the foundational algorithm for GrowSmart? Lyra challenged, keeping the focus on specific, provable claims. Or that the current implementation contains the vulnerabilities clearly demonstrated in these simulations? I'm stating that complex technologies evolved through the contributions of many researchers over time, all working under Hyperion's direction and within our intellectual property framework. Callum's response was practiced corporate evasion. As for implementation specifications, technical discussions require proper context and expertise. Context like this? Lyra activated the second phase of their presentation override, displaying internal emails documenting the systematic erasure of Astrid's contributions and the deliberate decision to proceed with the flawed implementation despite technical team warnings. The audience reaction was immediate, with investors and media representatives capturing images of the displayed evidence before it could be removed. Orion Teller, from his position at the technical control station, ensured the evidence remained visible long enough to be thoroughly documented. Mr. Rhodes, Phoenix Wright called from the audience, would you care to comment on these internal communications that appear to show a deliberate decision to prioritize acquisition timelines over system safety? Callum's composure cracked visibly, his gaze shifting between the damning evidence on screen, the increasingly restless audience, and Astrid's steady presence in the crowd. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its confident resonance. These materials are being presented without proper context. Hyperion has always maintained the highest standards of both innovation and ethics. Then you would welcome an independent review of the GrowSmart implementation before deployment? Dar. Reeves suggested loudly. To verify its safety and efficacy. Before Callum could respond, Zara Chen stepped forward from her position among the Hyperion technical staff. As the lead researcher currently working on GrowSmart implementation, I can confirm that these vulnerability concerns are valid and have been raised repeatedly through appropriate channels. This unexpected support from within Hyperion's own ranks created a tipping point. Board members in the audience began conferring urgently. Media representatives were already filing preliminary reports. And investors, particularly representatives from Nexus Global, were visibly alarmed by the implications for their pending acquisition. Lyra moved to the center of the stage, directly facing Callum. The technology community deserves the truth, Mr. Rhodes. About who really developed the algorithm that built Hyperion's success. About the current risks being taken with critical technology. And perhaps most importantly, about the kind of leadership that would prioritize acquisition profits over both intellectual honesty and human safety. Callum's eyes narrowed as he stepped toward her, his voice lowered though still audible through his microphone. "You have no idea what you've done. The damage you've caused to this company, to its mission." "I know exactly what I've done," Lyra replied evenly. "I've honored my mother's legacy and protected the people who depend on this technology working as promised. The only damage here is what you've inflicted yourself, through decisions made 18 years ago and continue to this day. Your mother signed an agreement. She accepted compensation. This public spectacle violates legally binding terms. I signed nothing. And the truth deserves to be known, regardless of what legal maneuvers were used to suppress it." Callum's expression hardened as he recognized the determination in her that mirrored his own. "Who are you to appoint yourself arbiter of truth and justice? Some crusading student with a personal agenda? I'm Lyra Vale." She held his gaze steadily. "Your daughter." The words landed with physical impact, audible to the entire audience through their still active microphones. Callum actually stepped back, the color draining from his face as the personal dimension of the confrontation became clear to everyone present. The silence that followed was broken by Orion Teller, who had moved to join Astrid at the front of the audience. "As Hyperion's chief strategy officer and a founding executive, I can confirm the accuracy of Ms. Vale's claims regarding both the technology origins and the current implementation concerns. These matters require immediate board attention." The summit dissolved into chaos after that. Security finally moved to escort Lyra from the stage, though with notable restraint given the public nature of the revelations. Hyperion board members convened an emergency session in a side room. Media representatives swarmed around Phoenix Wright, Astrid, and other identifiable participants in the dramatic confrontation. Callum Rhodes disappeared from public view, retreating with his legal team to assess the damage and plan a response. The Nexus acquisition representatives issued an immediate statement suspending negotiations pending full investigation of the technical concerns raised. 3 hours later, Lyra and Astrid sat in a nearby cafe, monitoring the unfolding media coverage of what was being called the most significant technology industry scandal in a decade. "It's happening even faster than we anticipated," Astrid observed, scanning news alerts on her tablet. "Hyperion stock is down 12% and still falling. The board has announced an independent review of both the historical attribution claims and the current implementation concerns." "And Callum?" Lyra asked, her voice betraying the emotional toll of the confrontation despite their success. "No public statement yet. But according to Teller, there's significant pressure for his resignation, at least temporarily while investigations proceed." Lyra nodded, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. "I thought I'd feel more triumphant. But mostly I feel tired. And sad, somehow. Not for him, exactly, but for what could have been. For the family we never got to be." Astrid reached across the table to take her daughter's hand. "That's the cost of pursuing justice in cases like this. There's no clean victory, no perfect resolution that erases the original harm." "Was it worth it?" Lyra asked softly. "Now that it's done, was it the right choice?" Before Astrid could answer, both their phones chimed simultaneously. The message was from Orion Teller, Rhodes requesting private meeting. "Both of you. My office as neutral location. 5 p.m. today. Your decision entirely." They looked at each other, the implications clear. After 18 years of separation and months of strategic conflict, Callum Rhodes was finally ready to face the family he had abandoned. "We don't have to go," Astrid said immediately. "We've achieved what matters most. The truth is public. The technology will be properly reviewed. Your future is secure." "But it feels unfinished somehow," Lyra replied thoughtfully. "Like we've addressed the public wrongs but not the personal ones. That may not be possible. Some wounds don't heal with confrontation. I still want to try." Not for him, but for us. For closure, if nothing else. Astrid studied her daughter's face, seeing the determination that had driven her remarkable campaign for justice. Then we'll go together. Whatever happens, we face it as a family. The family we've always been, even without him. Orion Teller's office provided the neutral ground they had requested, with Teller himself absent to allow for genuine privacy. When they arrived, they found Callum Rhodes already waiting, looking markedly different from the confident CEO who had taken the summit stage hours earlier. His carefully maintained image had cracked, revealing a man confronting the consequences of decades of choices. He stood as they entered, his expression guarded but lacking the hardened defensiveness they had expected. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." The three of them settled into an uncomfortable triangle, 18 years of separation crystallized in a single room. For a moment, no one spoke, the weight of their shared and divided history hanging in the air between them. "The board has requested my temporary resignation," Callum finally said, breaking the silence. "Pending full investigation of both the historical attribution concerns and the implementation modifications." "That seems appropriate," Astrid replied neutrally. "Yes. It does." He looked directly at her for the first time. "I won't insult either of you with denial or justification. The evidence you presented was comprehensive and largely accurate." "Largely?" Lyra couldn't help challenging. "The technical concerns about the implementation are legitimate. Your adaptation protocol was modified against technical recommendation, primarily to meet acquisition timelines." He acknowledged this with surprising directness. "As for the historical attribution, the facts are essentially as you presented them, though the narrative context is more complex than a public revelation can capture." "What context justifies erasing someone's fundamental contributions and claiming them as your own?" Astrid's voice remained calm despite the enormity of what they were discussing. "None that would satisfy you. Or that satisfies me anymore." Callum's admission carried a weariness that suggested genuine reflection rather than strategic concession. Early success creates patterns that become increasingly difficult to correct as they compound over time. The narrative of the visionary founder became Hyperion's foundational myth. Maintaining it seemed necessary for the company's continued growth and impact. At the expense of truth. Of integrity. Lyra leaned forward. Of family. Callum met his daughter's gaze, really seeing her perhaps for the first time. "Yes. At costs I didn't fully comprehend until today." "What do you want from this meeting?" Astrid asked directly. "We didn't come for apologies, and I doubt you called us here to offer them." "Actually, I did." The simple statement seemed to surprise even Callum himself. Not with any expectation of forgiveness or reconciliation. But because after 18 years of maintaining a narrative I knew was fundamentally flawed, speaking truth feels necessary. He turned to Astrid. "What I did to you was unforgivable. Taking credit for your work, using legal maneuvers to silence you, abandoning you when you were pregnant with our child. There is no justification that could possibly suffice." Then to Lyra, "And what I did to you is even worse. Denying your existence, missing your entire life, while building an empire partly on work that should have been your mother's legacy to you. I can't undo any of it. I can only acknowledge it honestly, finally." The raw admission hung in the air, so different from what they had expected that neither Astrid nor Lyra immediately responded. "What happens now?" Lyra finally asked. "With Hyperion, with Grossmart, with everything you've built?" "That depends partly on what you both want." Callum's response was thoughtful rather than defensive. "The board is prepared to formally acknowledge Astrid's foundational contributions to the technology, with appropriate compensation for the historical oversight. The flawed implementation will be halted pending complete review and correction, likely incorporating your original adaptation protocol design." "And you?" Astrid pressed. "What do you want, Callum?" "Beyond navigating this corporate crisis?" He looked out the window at the city skyline before answering. I want what I can't have. The chance to make different choices 18 years ago. The opportunity to know my daughter as she grew up. His gaze returned to them, the practiced charm entirely absent. But in the absence of that impossible wish, I want to stop living inside a narrative built on erasure and denial. However that needs to happen. The conversation continued for another hour, moving beyond recrimination to practical considerations about Hyperion's future, proper attribution for Astrid's contributions, and implementation of Lyra's adaptation protocol in its original, safer form. No miracle of forgiveness occurred, no dramatic reconciliation erased 18 years of separation. But something else emerged, a fragile foundation of honesty upon which something might eventually be built. As they prepared to leave, Callum asked one final question. Would you consider, someday, telling me about your life, Lyra? Not as some bid for fatherhood I haven't earned, but simply to know who my daughter became without me. Lyra considered this carefully before responding. Perhaps. When the current situation has stabilized. When proper recognition has been established. When it can be about knowing each other as people, not about corporate damage control or legal maneuvering. That's more than I deserve. It's not about what you deserve, Lyra replied with the wisdom that had driven her remarkable journey. It's about what serves truth moving forward. The past can't be undone, but the future doesn't have to repeat its patterns. Epilogue, 6 months later. The auditorium at Stanford University was filled to capacity for the special lecture titled Ethical Innovation, Lessons from the Grossmart Revolution. Students, faculty, and technology industry representatives had gathered to hear from the principal figures in what had become a case study in both corporate accountability and technological ethics. Astrid Vale took the podium first, now officially recognized as the original architect of the algorithmic approach that had transformed agricultural technology. Her return to prominence in the field had been meteoric following Hyperion's formal acknowledgement of her contributions, with universities and research institutes competing for her expertise. Innovation doesn't occur in isolation, she began. It emerges from collaborative thinking, from building upon existing knowledge, from the interchange of ideas across disciplines. But innovation without ethical foundation risks becoming exploitation rather than progress. She outlined the journey of the Grossmart algorithm from its conceptual origins through its commercial implementation, now with proper historical attribution restored. The technology itself had been significantly transformed following the summit revelations, with Lyra's adaptation protocol properly integrated and oversight mechanisms established to ensure technical integrity remained paramount in deployment decisions. When Lyra joined her mother at the podium, the audience's enthusiastic response reflected her status as both whistleblower and innovative technologist in her own right. At 19, she had become the youngest recipient of the Global Innovation Ethics Award, recognizing not just her technical contributions but her courage in challenging powerful institutional forces. The most valuable technology is that which serves humanity's needs while respecting fundamental truths, Lyra told the audience. When we separate innovation from integrity, we create systems that may appear functional but contain hidden vulnerabilities that eventually undermine their purpose. The final speaker surprised many who had followed the story from afar. Callum Rhodes, no longer Hyperion's CEO but still a significant figure in technology circles, had accepted the invitation to participate in this public discussion of the case that had transformed his company and reputation. There is no corporate success worth achieving at the expense of truth, he acknowledged, the humility in his demeanor a marked contrast to his former public persona. The narrative I constructed and maintained for nearly 2 decades seemed necessary for Hyperion's advancement, but ultimately created vulnerabilities that threatened both the company and the technology's intended impact. The panel discussion that followed brought all 3 figures together publicly for the first time since the summit confrontation. Their interaction remained formal but respectfully collegial, each contributing perspective to a nuanced exploration of how technology development, corporate governance, and individual ethics intersect. After the formal presentation concluded, as attendees networked and discussed the implications, Lyra found herself briefly alone with Callum in a quiet corner of the reception area. "Your presentation was excellent," he said, the awkwardness of their still developing relationship evident but no longer overwhelming. "The adaptation protocol implementation is showing remarkable results in the Southeast Asian deployments." "Thank you. The field data has been encouraging." She studied him thoughtfully. "How are you finding your new role?" Following his resignation as CEO, Callum had established an institute focused on ethical governance in technology companies, leveraging his experience as both cautionary tale and pathway to reform. "Challenging. Humbling. Necessary." His smile held a hint of self-deprecation. "Building something new with integrity as its foundation feels different than maintaining a narrative built on erasure." "Different in what way?" "Sustainable," he replied simply. "What I built before required constant reinforcement of a flawed foundation. This work, while more difficult in some ways, doesn't carry that same inherent instability." Lyra nodded, understanding. Their relationship remained a work in progress, neither the complete estrangement of the past 18 years nor anything approaching normal father-daughter connection. But it had evolved into something neither had anticipated during their confrontation, a careful, mutual respect that acknowledged both historical truths and present realities. Across the room, Astrid was engaged in animated conversation with several young researchers clearly inspired by her recently published work. Her return to prominence had opened doors for a new generation of scientists focused on technology applications that prioritized accessibility alongside innovation. "She's remarkable," Callum observed, following Lyra's gaze. "She always was." "Yes," Lyra agreed. "She built something extraordinary, despite everything." "You both did." As the reception continued around them, the three principal figures in what had become known as the Hyperion Revelation represented different aspects of a complex truth about innovation, ethics, and human relationships. No perfect resolution had erased the past harm, no dramatic reconciliation had transformed estrangement into family. Instead, something more nuanced had emerged, a commitment to moving forward with integrity, acknowledging both what had been lost and what might still be built. The technology at the center of their story continued its evolution, now with proper attribution, ethical oversight, and a foundation of transparency. GrowSmart implementations worldwide operated with Lyra's adaptation protocol properly integrated, providing sustainable agricultural support to communities facing climate challenges. Most importantly, the narrative itself had been reclaimed and corrected. Astrid Vale's contributions recognized and honored. Lyra's identity acknowledged and respected. And Callum Rhodes' carefully constructed myth replaced with a more difficult but ultimately more valuable truth. In the end, what had begun as a daughter's quest for justice had transformed into something larger, a case study in how truth, however long suppressed, eventually finds its way to the surface. Not always with perfect resolution, not without costs and complications, but with the opportunity to build something better on its foundation. If this story of courage and the relentless pursuit of truth resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that explore the human dimension behind today's headlines. In the comments below, I'd love to hear about a time when you faced a difficult truth or stood up against seemingly insurmountable odds. Remember, sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply refusing to accept that wrong cannot be made right.